Chapter 536. Who in the world wanted immortality the most? Without a doubt, it had to be the emperor. Enjoying the supreme power and the melting of the human world, no matter how heroic these emperors were when they were young, they were still afraid of death when they were old. They were afraid that death would take everything away from them. Even the first emperor who had conquered the world from the weak Qin dynasty to the strong Qin dynasty was no exception. He wantonly searched for necromancers and even spent a lot of money to send Su Fu out to sea to find the elixir of immortality for him. Unfortunately, he could not escape the erosion of time, and the great Qin dynasty died for the second time. Compared to the illusory legends in the previous life, the elixir of immortality on the Tianwu continent had appeared. After a period of accumulation, it had gained some fame and attracted many cultivators who were nearing the end of their lifespan to the Jade Lake Palace in the south of the Shenwu dynasty to take the elixir of immortality. Although everyone knew that those who took the elixir of immortality did not voluntarily become the Jade Lake Palace's consecrators, few could resist the temptation of immortality and threw themselves into the arms of the Jade Lake Palace. Now, the Jade Lake Celestial Palace had accepted more than 100,000 tributes, and their cultivations were generally not low. Even the Shenwu dynasty at its peak would be afraid of such a force. However, Lei Qiusheng changed his previous domineering style and didn't do anything, as if the Jade Lake Celestial Palace didn't pose any threat to him. Some people guessed that the master behind the Jade Lake Palace was Lei Qiusheng. Some people guessed that Lei Qiusheng also wanted the elixir of immortality. But no matter what, the master of the Jade Lake Palace was already a powerful existence standing at the top of the Shenwu dynasty. If he wanted to meet the great Khan of the Shuangjin dynasty in the north, it would not be a small matter. When the great Khan was young, he was a terrifying existence that suppressed the Wanjian dynasty in the south and the Windsource dynasty in the north. If Mirafrost was a combination of wolf and dog, then this great Khan was a lion from head to toe, and a very aggressive one at that. Under his leadership, even a puppy would quickly grow into a ferocious wolf. No matter how heavily wounded it was, it would not hide with its tail between its legs to lick its wounds. Instead, it would continue to fight its opponent to the death until the victor was decided. After devouring its opponent's corpse, it would become even stronger and more terrifying, and then seek out its next opponent. When the great Khan was young, the so-called famous generals Yan Xingqi, Lei Qiusheng, and even the Marshal Saint Qi of the Wind Source were all no match for him. Even when both sides joined forces, they were still defeated by the great Khan. Could it be? The shock in Lin Yuan's eyes intensified. He knew very well what the elixir of immortality was. It could indeed give people immortality, but that was when they were separated from their physical bodies. Even their original memories would be blurred. Before their cultivation reached a certain level, they would only listen to the orders of a higher-level sky demon. They could not even be considered as sky demons. After all, sky demons still had their own thoughts. These inferior races were no different from dogs in the eyes of a sky demon. However, not many people knew about this. What they valued most was immortality. After all, in the Tianwu continent that had lost the top inheritances, except for the top forces, most cultivators only pursued immortality. Cultivators like Ink Abyss who pursued the Great Tao were too few. A shortcut had appeared in front of them. Who knew how many people with weak minds would want to try it? Although the great Khan had once pursued the Great Tao, he was now old and could reach the end of his lifespan at any moment. If he was only a cultivator, he would definitely resist the so-called elixir of immortality. However, he still had the identity of the great Khan. At the same time, he also knew that once he died, the entire Bloodbath tribe would be nibbled away by others. His bloodline and clansmen would become slaves of others. Even if there was a 1 in 10,000 chance, the great Khan would not be willing to die. If he did not want to die, he would have to accept the elixir of immortality and turn into a sky demon. Lei Qiusheng, who was already in cahoots with the sky demon, and Frost Mirror Khan, who obeyed the sky demon's every word, how could the northern frontier resist the joint attack of the two empires? Damn it! What are these top forces doing? Lin Yuan cursed angrily. Ding Zai had said before that they did not care about the dispute between the Shenwu dynasty and the northern frontier, but the Sky Demon's rebellion could only occur within the Shinwu dynasty. Once the northern frontier was destroyed, they would immediately intervene and wipe out the Sky Demon's troops and Lei Qiusheng. Furthermore, the Sky Demon, who had left the Shinwu dynasty's territory, would also be their target. But even if they did not care, this was such a big matter. Could it be that no one had come to give him a heads up? Did they trust his intelligence agency, or were they held back by other matters? Ever since he knew what the system was hiding in his body and what kind of enemies he had to face were, Lin Yuan did not dare to believe in the so-called luck anymore. He had to prepare for the worst. Even with the promise of the top forces, Lin Yuan did not dare to bet on whether the palace master of the Jade Lake Immortal Palace could reach the Shuangjin dynasty safely. Because the top forces only valued Lin Yuan's potential, they thought that Lin Yuan was qualified to stand side by side with them in the future, so they showed goodwill to Lin Yuan. However, this did not mean that Lin Yuan now had the ability to challenge the top forces. In a situation where the two sides were not equal in strength, promises were powerless and laughable. Even if they did not carry out the promise, they could just casually find an excuse to brush off Lin Yuan. Would Lin Yuan fall out with them? No, I can't just sit here and wait for death. A cold light flashed in his multicolored eyes. Lin Yuan gritted his teeth and soared into the sky, rushing toward the south. Ding! Congratulations to the host for triggering a mission, life and death. The Sky Demon's minions have launched an attack. With the power of the northern frontier alone, you are like a small boat in the sea. So, will you choose to guard the northern frontier and wait for the crisis to come, or will you take the initiative to attack and eliminate the crisis? Ding! Detected that the host has made a choice. The mission content has been changed. Please quickly find the palace master of the Jade Lake Immortal Palace and destroy her and her minions. Mission reward, 1 premium lucky draw ticket, failure punishment, face the joint attack of the Shinwu and Shuangjin dynasties. Countdown to failure, 3 days and 14 hours. The long-awaited mission window once again appeared in Lin Yuan's mind. Lin Yuan, who had been hiding in the northern frontier for several months, had to give up on suppressing the hidden dangers in the northern frontier. He had to show his strength again and fight. Chapter 537. Ever since he had broken through to the Mountain Lord realm, Lin Yuan no longer had any interest in personally killing his enemies to obtain attribute points. This was because every level up in this realm required an incomparably large amount of attribute points. It was so large that Lin Yuan did not even know the exact number of attribute points. If he wanted to obtain a few or a dozen attribute points from killing his enemies, it would be like pouring a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. Lin Yuan now had 2 ways to rapidly increase his attribute points. One was to use the system to create a large number of life forms and then start a crazy war with all the surrounding forces. After all, Lin Yuan would also obtain a portion of attribute points from the lives these life forms killed. However, the cost-performance ratio of this method was very low. This was because Lin Yuan first had to obtain the materials from the life forms when creating life forms. After creating life forms, he still had to use his own stored attribute points to increase their strength. To put it bluntly, based on Moro's ability to create demonic beasts, the attribute points these demonic beasts gave Lin Yuan were not even as much as what Lin Yuan invested in them. There was still a long way to go before he could completely enter the mode where he could reap great rewards if he just left them alone. Furthermore, the demonic beasts he created were not immortal. Lin Yuan had already created several demonic beasts that had been upgraded to level 7 of the Wisdom Realm. However, they had all died in battle during the conflict with the Green Swamp clan. No matter how one looked at it, this path was not only a small reward, but also a high risk. It was also easy to lose everything. The other method was the Joss Flame model. This was the Joss Flame power that was produced when countless life forms worshipped Lin Yuan. In fact, it could be converted into various types of energy. Under a certain ratio, Lin Yuan could directly convert the Joss Flame power into attribute points. Although this function had not yet been activated due to the failure of the previous mission, every system model that accumulated to a certain extent would successively activate the sub-functions of the model. For example, the territory models soldier creation, the war models war treasury, and war mission. Therefore, when the Joss flame power accumulated to a certain extent, this conversion function would be activated sooner or later. The endless power of incense meant that even if Lin Yuan were to lie down and not move, he would be able to obtain a large number of attribute points. Moreover, the strands of Lin Yuan's divine sense in the Dragon King Temple could become Lin Yuan's doppelganger under the influence of the power of incense, helping him oversee the northern frontier's territory. Even if Lin Yuan's main body died, he could replace one of the strands of divine sense to continue living and use the power of incense to rebuild his body. The Dragon King Temple represented Lin Yuan's infinite life. Unless Lin Yuan was wiped out by the system, or if his opponent destroyed the Dragon King Temple and killed all his followers, Lin Yuan would never completely die. Even if he died, he could be reborn as a Yin Master. However, in that case, Lin Yuan would become a special life form that relied on the power of incense to exist and become stronger. He would be even more miserable than Li Zhong, who cultivated the sun of heaven gazing at air. This was because the withered territory would only cause the ruler to lose all his cultivation and followers to be wiped out. However, it would cause a Yin Master to die directly. Lin Yuan was very sure that this Joss flame model was the correct path for him to progress to the next stage of his growth. Moreover, the Joss flame model itself was also an inexhaustible treasure. Of course, becoming a Yin Master was not completely without hidden dangers. This was because this was the path that the system had chosen for him. If the investiture of the gods was a battle between the way of the heavens and Hongjun, then escaping from the origin world of the untainted land was undoubtedly the best example. During the investiture of the gods, the insufferably arrogant experts had almost all fallen in the battle of the investiture of the gods. After that, they were listed on the investiture of the gods, which could be considered as a branch of the Yin Master. Their survival depended on the power of incense. It was not an exaggeration to call them slaves. After all, if one wanted to kill these gods, one only needed to say that they were superstitious. Slowly reducing their followers, their strength would become weaker and weaker. Even the insufferably arrogant experts of the antiquity age would gradually be unable to show their existence. Therefore, Lin Yuan was very sure that before he had enough strength to challenge Hongjun and the way of the heavens, he could walk this path. However, he could not walk too deep into it. Otherwise, the situation of those famous experts withering after becoming gods would reappear on him. However, the production of the power of incense was still a difficult problem for the current Lin Yuan. Therefore, he could not leave even if he wanted to. Because he had already become the god of the northern frontier, there were no other gods in this land. The Dragon King temples in various places were also flourishing with incense. However, this was meaningless because the people in the northern frontier did not sincerely believe in him. In the hearts of the people who did not know about the struggle between the upper class, even Li Zhong's prestige was higher than Lin Yuan's. This was because Lin Yuan's existence was good for the entire northern frontier. However, Li Zhong's actions had helped the people at the bottom to obtain benefits that they could see and touch. The people who had set up shrines to Li Zhong at home were more pious than Lin Yuan's. Those who knew about Lin Yuan's actions were either the heads of aristocratic families or the subordinates of Lin Yuan who existed for their own ambitions. They would treat Lin Yuan as an excellent ruler, but they would not treat Lin Yuan as a true god. Without devout believers, it was naturally impossible to produce the power of incense. Lin Yuan thought about this problem in his mind as he hurried on his way. Of course, he could easily make the people in the northern frontier become his devout believers. However, in that case, the meaning of Li Zhong's existence would be lost. Lin Yuan was also not suitable to do these things personally. After all, a monster doing its best for the welfare of the human people. Not to mention whether others would believe this, even Lin Yuan himself felt awkward. System, tell me, how can I obtain the power of incense? Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly and asked in a deep voice. The system maintained its silence, obviously unwilling to respond to Lin Yuan. After all, it had already planned out the path to obtain the power of incense for Lin Yuan. It had even offered the big pie of conversion templates. However, Lin Yuan did not do as it wished and even failed the mission. After entering the arcane realm and consuming the dragonization root, he even obtained the nether realm's black water, an innate talent that even the system had to be wary of. It would be strange if it still wanted to respond to Lin Yuan. When humans are faced with despair, they will seek comfort from the spiritual level. If you want the people in the northern frontier to worship you, then your actions are undoubtedly a failure. This is because they are safe, happy, and prosperous under your control. They believe that everything they want can be obtained through their own efforts. The existence of a god does not mean much to them. Under such circumstances, if you expect them to worship you as a god, then you might as well expect the power of incense to appear out of thin air. After a long while, the system finally complained somewhat helplessly. Chapter 538. Lin Yuan rolled his eyes helplessly at the system's ridicule. He didn't think his actions were wrong. After all, he lived in a blissful era without any legends of gods. In the world of his previous life, everything could be obtained through hard work. After coming to this world, Lin Yuan used his own hard work to transform the northern frontier into what he knew. This northern frontier would make Lin Yuan feel close and familiar, and wouldn't make him feel out of place as an outsider with memories of his previous life. But here was the problem. Because this time, he wasn't walking in the world as a human. He was that god. As a god, he was telling the world that even without the blessings of gods, they could obtain everything through their own hard work. Wasn't this dragging himself down? Host, you still have a chance to repent. As long as you give up part of the benefits of the northern frontier and let the northern frontier return to its previous path, you can use facts to tell the world that without your protection, everything they see is just a bubble that can collapse at any time. Under such circumstances, they will quickly give up on the idea of a new life and worship you, the high and mighty god, once again. The system couldn't be bothered to ridicule Lin Yuan's actions. Lin Yuan's origin world had abolished feudal superstitions and rejected all kinds of supernatural beings because that was the method used by the heavenly axiom to deal with the increasingly powerful gods. After all, the heavenly axiom didn't rely on the power of faith to exist. However, as the god it chose, Lin Yuan didn't hesitate to use such methods. He was simply making life difficult for himself. This also caused Lin Yuan's cultivation to progress slowly after he became a mountain lord, and he still hadn't broken through to the second level of the mountain lord realm. This was a classic example of me against myself. It seemed that although Lin Yuan's actions were dragging himself down, it wasn't to the point where he couldn't be saved. This was because although the people of the northern frontier had experienced a change of dynasties, they were still the same people. They still had a sense of reverence for powerful cultivators and ancient gods. As long as Lin Yuan was willing to let them face despair, they would still worship Lin Yuan as their faith, and he would be able to create an endless supply of incense. I'll think about it. Lin Yuan took a deep breath and began to travel at full speed. In ancient times, regardless of whether it was humans or gods, they all had the power to lift things as if they were light. It was a power that was enough to make the heavenly Tao tremble in fear. For example, even King Zhou of Shang, the first fatuous ruler of all time, was a terrifying existence known as the King of Men. He was so terrifying that he did not feel any psychological burden when he did something like molesting Nuwa. Nuwa could not even do anything to him. She could only use all kinds of tricks to plot against King Zhou of Shang and make him lose his kingly aura. That was how Zhou replaced Shang. On the other hand, if what happened in the future of Untainted Land was as Lin Yuan had guessed, the position of King Zhou should be Lin Yuan's future goal. An existence that could be compared to Hongjun and the heavenly Tao. That's right, they're on the same level. He did not care about Nuwa, who was in Hongjun's camp. At the same time, the entire Great Zhou faction was his enemy. This was because King Zhou was known as the King of Men, while the Emperor of Zhou was known as the Son of Heaven. This title already explained too many problems. The ruler of the Shang dynasty was the King of Men, who represented the human race. He was an existence that could wrestle with the heavenly Tao and Hongjun's camps. Even in the secular world, the Shang dynasty had absolute power. Even the sages could not do anything to him. Although King Zhou was the loser, he was not defeated by any side. It was the other two camps that joined forces to deal with him. This also showed that Hongjun and the Heavenly Tao were afraid of this King of Men. Of course, in the process of the two camps dealing with the King of Men, the one who had the last laugh was still the origin of the Heavenly Tao. This was because the victor's king called himself the Son of Heaven, which implied that he was the eldest son or son of heaven. However, the Heavenly Tao obtained the ruling power of the secular world, while Hongjuan's side came up with the list of deification, officially putting the special existence of God on the stage. They told the world that everything was bestowed by God. Even if the Son of Heaven was unvirtuous, it would make the gods angry and cause all kinds of natural and man-made disasters. They tried to place God above a man, and then started the second battle between the two sides. In order to erase the influence of the gods on the secular world, the Heavenly Tao of the source world could be said to have painstakingly gone through the changes of countless dynasties. Finally, the so-called Son of Heaven's right was banned, and the high and mighty emperor was beaten into a mortal. All kinds of beliefs and sacrifices were cancelled. It was not easy to make God become a legend and gradually fade away. However, in this battle, the winner might not necessarily be the Heavenly Tao. This was because although it banned the concept of God, man, who had been unable to recover from the setback after King Zhou, rose again. He used the power of science and technology to fight against the Heavenly Tao. Even the title of Son of Heaven was abolished. After a short conversation, Lin Yuan quickly straightened out his thoughts. Firstly, the Heavenly Tao and Hongjun were not existences that he could not contend with. This was because the former King Zhou and the previous King of Men, in his previous life had become victors through a long period of time and hard work. They had become existences that the Heavenly Tao and Hongjun feared. Secondly, Lin Yuan had also determined his future path, King Zhou. He was not a mortal with a physical body. He, who had the ability to cultivate, did not need to completely rely on the power of science and technology. He could completely become an existence like King Zhou and directly participate in the struggle between Hongjun and the Heavenly Tao. He did not need to use the power of science and technology to deter the other two camps and simply make them not dare to use him as a chess piece. Lin Yuan did not like to be schemed against, and he did not like to have his life and death in the hands of others. Therefore, his goal was not to protect himself, but to win. He wanted to let these existences, who had been high and mighty since the prehistoric times, know the will and power of a man. Even though he had lost the appearance and habits of a human, the essence of Lin Yuan's soul had not changed for a moment. Even when he came to this world, the thoughts that constantly spurred him to become stronger and return to his original world to take revenge had not faded for a moment. It was just that before that, he had a new goal. Whatever. However, I have to remind the host that no matter how powerful a life form is, there is a limit to its lifespan. Although you are very young, it is still very difficult for you to enter the next realm without relying on the power of incense. And even if you can do it, how will you cross the next realm? You are the host chosen by this system. In the future, you will also evolve into a life form that will make all the world submit to you. Although this system will not force you to do anything, it will re-examine your potential at any time. If you lose the space to improve, this system will unbind you at any time and choose a new host. Chapter 539. Listening to the system's cold, electronically synthesized voice, Lin Yuan's eyes flashed with a hint of mockery. This was the reason why he had always wanted to transcend the system and obtain the power that truly belonged to him. Everything he had now was given to him by the system. If the two sides really turned against each other one day, then the system would unbind him and he would be nothing. He would be thankful if he could return to being a little black snake and live out the rest of his life. In addition, Lin Yuan also planned to deepen his cooperation with the Incubus. From the words of the Incubus, although they were similar to the rebel army in Hongjuan's eyes, they did not have a close relationship with the Heavenly Tao. Moreover, from a historical perspective, the strength of this rebel army could be said to be quite terrifying. After the fall of the Zhou dynasty, the great Qin Empire swept through the 6 states and became the first emperor, but he was not called the Son of Heaven. Later, there were legends that said that Ingzheng was the ancestor dragon. Therefore, the rebel army of the Ink Abyss had also won in this multi-sided competition. Although the great Qin Empire had fallen for 2 generations, the amount of information was too much for Lin Yuan at this moment. This meant that the rebel army of the Ink Abyss once had the power to fight against the heavenly Dao and Hongjun. Although they failed in the end, the fighting experience passed down by the victors was still worth learning. 4 hours later, a fleet of turrets set off northward from the lower reaches of the Wei River under the jurisdiction of the Shenwu dynasty. A young man in white put his hands behind his back. Scarlet light flickered in his clear black and white eyes. This fleet of turrets did not have any flags, but the scale of more than 300 turrets was not something that could be casually gathered by just anyone. With the scale of the turrets of the Shenwu dynasty, each turret could carry 3,000 soldiers. If this fleet was full, this team could instantly bring out a lineup of nearly 900,000 soldiers to fight a battle. Even the 5,000 soldiers of the Fallen Star Army, who were patrolling the area at the moment, would not have been able to do anything to them. What was even more terrifying was that the ones patrolling the perimeter of the ship were also dressed in white, with swords hanging from their waists. Even the weakest among them was at level 6 of the airborne realm. If that was all there was to it, the cultivators trained by the northern region would have been on par with them. However, the oldest among the group of people dressed in white looked to be in his late 20s, and there was no lack of teenagers in their teens. Even those top-notch sects and clans might not have been able to gather such a team of such a level of cultivation and scale. The merchant ships coming and going on the Wei River were all shocked for a while when they saw this huge fleet of turrets passed by their own fleet. "We won't run into any trouble, will we, first generation?" Behind the young man in white was a girl in white with eyebrows and eyes. She looked to be around 13 or 14 years old, and even her facial features were not fully developed yet. However, the aura on her body was extremely terrifying. The aura of a heavenly strength realm overflowed, and even the merchant ships passing by did not dare to look at this luxurious turrets at the center of the fleet. The young man looked at the raging waters of the Wei River, and a wicked smile appeared on his handsome face. He said in a cold voice, "No matter how powerful the Black Jiao is, it is nothing but a beast. Those rumors about how powerful it is are just a bunch of trash who dare not face their own failure and are just trying to brag about it. Not to mention that it can't detect that we are going through the Wei River. Even if it did, do you think I would be afraid of it?" At this point, the young man slowly clenched his fists, and his expression became somewhat ferocious. "We are the powerful divine ones. How can these weak humans and demonic beasts stop us?" The girl in white curled her lips, but she did not dare to refute. This was because the young man in white in front of her was the first generation, the pure-blooded sky demon with the noblest bloodline. Not to mention those existences on the surrounding turrets who had taken the elixir of immortality and turned into sky demons. Even an ordinary sky demon like her would not be able to show any disrespect or hostility to him under the suppression of this bloodline. After all, there was almost no meaning in making peace with a sky demon without a physical body. The first-generation sky demon that was born under such circumstances would directly crush all the other sky demons in terms of bloodline. Even their parents would only have the qualifications to bow down in front of them. However, whether or not this exceptional talent feared the Black Flood Dragon was something that different people had different opinions about. If the Black Jiao was really not worth mentioning, as he said, this first generation would not have released the news that the Jade Lake Heavenly Palace was going to visit the Khan of the Shuangjian dynasty in advance. Furthermore, he had prepared a sky demon army that was not weak and had followed the original plan to travel by land to the Shuangjian dynasty, while he led all the remaining forces of the Jade Lake Heavenly Palace north from the Wei River to the Frost Plains. If this was not fear, what else could it be? At this moment, a figure in white suddenly flew out of the ship at the forefront. A moment later, a sky demon at airborne realm level 9 knelt in front of the first generation with one knee and said in a deep voice, "First generation, there is an army of the northern frontier ahead of us that has set up a blockade. They want us to provide proof of our identity, otherwise we will not be allowed to pass." The first generation's expression turned slightly gloomy, and he coldly said, "How many times do I have to tell you? Do not call me first generation when we are out there. You have to call me Palace Lord or young Master Zhao." "Yes, Palace Lord. Please punish us for our ignorance, Palace Lord." The sky demon gasped and directly pressed his head to the floor, his body trembling slightly. The Palace Lord waved his hand in annoyance and coldly said, "Forget it. There is no need to argue with a sky demon like you. Do you know which army of the northern frontier is setting up a blockade?" There was no navy in the northern frontier, or rather, there was no human navy. The ones hibernating in the Wei River were all aquatic monsters loyal to Lin Yuan. These monsters lurking in the water could easily cut through the depths of ships, making it impossible for humans to stand in the Wei River. They also took advantage of the environment to fight humans, making it easy for them to drag humans who were stronger than them into the river and devour them. Therefore, compared to the wide waters of the Wei River, the Shenwu dynasty was more inclined to fight at the source of the Wei River, where the water flow was slow and the water was narrow. Now that a fleet of ships suddenly appeared out of nowhere and claimed to be the army of the northern frontier, it was easy to be stunned. I have asked, and they said that they are the Blackwater Army, but before this, I have never heard of the Blackwater Army. However, they have the military identification of the northern frontier on them, so they should be the newly established army of the northern frontier. The sky demon tried his best to calm down his trembling voice, but it was difficult to do so in front of the temperamental Palace Lord. Previously, there was a sky demon from a different race who bumped into the Palace Lord and had his throat pierced by the Palace Lord. Even his soul was pulled out and eaten by the Palace Lord. Chapter 540. Blackwater Army? I've never heard of them before. The palace master waved his hand indifferently and said in a cold voice, "Inform all the ships to prepare for battle. We're going to rush over." As a noble divine race, the palace master had never put the weak human beings in his eyes. After all, human beings were nothing more than flesh and blood for them and could be replaced at any time. If the Southern Expedition or the Fallen Star Army were to stop them, he would be patient enough to take out the identity documents prepared by Lei Qiusheng and give them to the other party, so as to avoid unnecessary trouble. But how dare a mere army that he had never heard of stop his fleet? Sky Demon lowered his head and responded. His figure once again rushed out, not daring to stay here for a moment longer. On the other side. Seeing the change in the formation of the ships, Qin Yu narrowed his eyes slightly and said in a cold voice, "Shameless things. Such a large fleet is not allowed to enter the Wei River. I just let them prove their identity and haven't driven them back yet. Since you want to rush over?" As an outstanding figure in the star class of the northern frontier, although Qin Yu was a general in the archer ranks, water battles were also the battlefield of archers, so he had also participated in the relevant training. Naturally, he could easily see that the formation of the other side's ships had changed into a battle formation. In fact, the Blackwater Army didn't care about the Wei River Basin at all. This was the territory of the aquatic demon beasts. It was just that the other side was unlucky and happened to encounter the Blackwater Army that had retreated to the northern frontier. Therefore, they blocked the river and set up defenses to let the other side prove their identity. Beat the drum and summon the demon beasts of the Wei River. Messenger, release the signal flare and summon the surrounding troops. Zhao Guangchong stretched his shoulders, picked up his sky piercer, and walked towards the warships waiting beside the big ship. Soon, more than 30 battleships set off and quickly approached the tower ship that was changing its formation. Zhao Guangchong carried the sky piercer on his shoulder, coldly looked at the huge ship that was blocking his way, and said coldly, "Everyone on the ship, listen to me. Wei River is now under the jurisdiction of the northern frontier. You have not proven your identity, and you have violated the rule that no ships with more than 10,000 people are allowed to enter Wei River. Now, I will give you two choices. One is to turn back to the port you sailed from, and the other is..." Whoosh! 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 Without waiting for Zhao Guangchong to finish his words, the men in white on the ship took out their bows and launched an attack. "You're courting death." Zhao Guangchong roared and waved the sky piercer in his hand, sweeping away the arrows that were flying towards him. With the Blackwater Army's equipment, these crossbows weren't enough to hurt them at all. However, the opponent's disregard for them was tantamount to giving them a resounding slap in the face. What kind of existence was the Blackwater Army? It was one of the best troops in the northern frontier. Even if it wasn't well known, its degree of terror was directly equal to the 5,000 old soldiers of the fallen Star Army. After all, those who could join the Blackwater Army were all members of the Star class of the northern frontier. As long as they were given enough time to grow, they would be able to lead an army by themselves in the future. Their status was much higher than the so-called Shenlin Jun reserves. This round of shooting by the Jade Lake Immortal Palace was tantamount to offending 80% of the generals who would carry the northern frontier in the future. But the Jade Lake Immortal Palace didn't care, because they were the high and mighty, immortal sky demon. They didn't care about the weak human race at all. Without needing Zhao Guangchong's order, more than 30 warships quickly approached the ship. Soldiers wearing black scale armor stepped on the warships and jumped to the edge of the ship, waving the weapons in their hands and starting a hand-to-hand combat. There were more than 10,000 people on the warships that were attacked, but they were completely defeated by the Blackwater Army, which was less than 300 people. Not only did they fail to recapture the edge of the ship, but they were also attacked deeper and deeper by the enemy. In a naval battle, the advantage in numbers was actually meaningless, because if one's cultivation didn't reach a certain level, it was impossible to walk on water as if it was flat ground. Coupled with the height of the ship itself, unless one could fly, the ones fighting with the Blackwater Army would always be a small group of Jade Lake Immortal Palace members at the front. As the warships relied on their fast speed to transport more and more Blackwater Army to the warships, the first few warships instantly went out of control. The nearby warships that weren't attacked began to quickly approach in an attempt to provide support, but before they could sail far, the demon beasts lurking under the water had already successfully penetrated their transmission line. The gradually sinking ship suddenly frightened many people. But these people in white all had good cultivation, so they quickly jumped to the nearest warship. Only a few members of the Jade Lake Immortal Palace who were too weak carelessly fell into the Wei River. Then, without even a moment of struggle, they were dragged down by the aquatic demon beasts. In just the blink of an eye, the water around the sunken ship was dyed red, and even the surging Wei River couldn't wash away the blood in an instant. Counterattack! The palace master roared with a gloomy face, his hands on the railing of the warship. His warship had been specially modified, so it was impossible for those demon beasts to penetrate the bottom of the ship. But this was only one ship, and the rest of the warships would sink sooner or later. Hundreds of thousands of people couldn't be squeezed on one ship. In that case, even if the demon beasts didn't attack, the ship would sink because it couldn't bear the weight. When they lost their footing, they would all die here. With the palace master's order, the sky demon on the other warships didn't care that their allies were still fighting. They took out their bows and began to shoot at the warships that were gradually occupied by the Blackwater Army. But their arrows didn't cause much damage to the Blackwater Army, and instead killed many of their own people. Qin Yu, who was in charge at the rear, raised the corner of his mouth and sneered, showing off your slight skill in front of an expert. Blackwater Archer Battalion, listen to my order. Aim at those people in white who aren't fighting in close combat with our fellow soldiers. Fire at full power and kill them. The words, fire at full power, didn't mean much to ordinary archers, but to the Blackwater Archer Battalion, this order had another meaning, burning money. Yes, burning money. When fighting at a distance above the Wei River, it was almost impossible to recover the sharp arrows made of the crimson steel mastiff bones. Except for those arrows that were embedded in bodies, almost all of them would be washed away by the surging Wei River. It was also impossible for the arrows to be embedded in bodies. Such arrows could only be pierced through several people in a row and then got stuck in abnormally hard bones. Otherwise, with the physical fitness of airborne realm cultivators, there was no way they could withstand such arrows. The economic losses caused by a round of volleys were enough to bankrupt a medium-sized family in an instant. This was one of the ways the Blackwater Army fought, throwing money at the enemy. According to Lord Dragon King's description, the death of their physical bodies does not mean that they will truly die. Their main bodies are spirits. Therefore, killing their physical bodies will only allow their spirits to break free from their shackles. Once they find a suitable physical body, they will be able to revive. The Blackwater Archer was shocked. As members of the Northern Frontier's Star Generals class, they indeed knew many secrets, but compared to Qin Yu and Zhao Guanchong, the information they knew was too little. It was just like how they knew about the Jade Lake Immortal Palace and the Elixir of Immortality. They also knew that the Elixir of Immortality was a trap, but they did not know what the Sky Demon was. Just a group of filthy parasites. Qin Yu pursed his lips and said in a deep voice, "Send those white porcelain bottles to Commander Zhao's side. I want to see if these dregs who rely on other races for the sake of immortality really don't know death." The white porcelain bottles were the demon-suppressing artifacts that Lin Yuan and the Southern Frontier's top forces had agreed to use. Although they were made of ordinary materials, they had engraved a Sky Demon sealing array inside the bottles when they were made. Once the bottles were opened, they would absorb the Sky Demon's body that had been separated from its physical body, and then use the power of the array to shackle the Sky Demon. Of course, the demon-suppressing artifacts were not a long-term solution. They could only seal the Sky Demon for 3 days. If the Sky Demon could not be transported to a forbidden area with a higher-level sealing array within 3 days, the Sky Demon would break out of the seal and quickly escape. Moreover, the stronger the Sky Demon, the faster it would break out of the seal. This demon sealing bottle could only restrain one Sky Demon at a time, and its effective range was only a pitiful 2 meters. It was the lowest level of demon-suppressing artifacts, but it was the most that the top forces could spare to support Lin Yuan. It was originally a demon-suppressing artifact that was supposed to be sent to the Northern Frontier and distributed to the various armies on the Northern Frontier. Unexpectedly, they had already started using it before they had even entered the Northern Frontier. For the Northern Frontier, this was not good news. Because this meant that the Sky Demon's tentacles had already begun to infiltrate the Northern Frontier. Moreover, the Northern Frontier did not have any place to suppress demons. It was said that the whereabouts of Lin Yuan, who could kill the Sky Demon, was currently unknown. At the very least, with Qin Yu's authority, he did not have the qualifications to know the whereabouts of Lin Yuan's original body. Sure enough, with the demon sealing bottle thrown in, those fearless people in white began to hesitate and retreat. It was as if they would rather be shot to death by those sharp arrows than engage in close combat with the Blackwater army. One by one, the demon's sealing bottle was sent back from the front line to the rear. The bottle's body was constantly trembling, and the red light that represented the sealing array was also flourishing. Such a strange scene caused many of the Blackwater army soldiers responsible for transporting the demon's sealing bottle to tremble in fear. They did not even know what they were fighting with. Because there were no demons and monsters in the Tianwu continent, even if they were transformed into Yin spirits, they still had a physical body. The appearance of these invisible things challenged the understanding of all the Blackwater army soldiers. On the side of the Blackwater army, on the side of the Jade Lake Immortal Palace, each and every one of them looked as if they had died. Especially as the first-generation palace master, she almost broke her silver teeth from gritting them. The Northern Frontier was a new force, and they had not fought with the creatures on the other side of the Tianwu continent. At this moment, they had guessed their identity, and even took out the demon's sealing bottle, which was an extremely terrifying weapon against the Sky Demon. All these signs pointed to one thing, that Trash Lei Qiuxing did not hide their whereabouts at all. Those top forces of the Tianwu continent had long known of their existence. Compared to the mysterious Black Jiao, the palace master was obviously more afraid of those top forces. Therefore, even if she was afraid, she still gritted her teeth and ordered, "The appearance of the demon-suppressing weapon means that our existence is no longer a secret. If we do not quickly break the deadlock, we will be wiped out sooner or later. It is time for you to be loyal to the divine race. Listen to my orders, all of you go forward and kill this damned army. Destroy all the demon-suppressing weapons." A group of ordinary Sky Demon soldiers who had long been eager to give it a try received the first generation's order. They all cheered and stepped into the air, heading straight for Zhao Guanchong and the others who were killing everywhere. There were also some who rushed towards the position of the Blackwater archers. Chapter 542. Despite the extravagant equipment the Blackwater army had, the gap between their cultivation and combat prowess was still not to be ignored. Tens of thousands of Heaven's Strength Realm Sky Demon were thrown into the battlefield, suppressing Zhao Guangchong and the others in an instant. Even the arrows were blocked by the invisible Chi of Vigor, either deviating from their targets or falling into the Wei River. The situation of the entire battlefield was completely reversed in an instant. While fighting was not what cultivators were good at, no one could deny that when an individual's strength reached a certain level, factors such as equipment and battle formations would no longer pose a huge threat. After all, both of those factors were derivatives that could allow one side to easily defeat the other side when both sides were of equal strength. However, an airborne realm cultivator, even if equipped with excellent equipment, was no more than a child with a gun. In the eyes of a real adult, they would still be unable to withstand a single blow. Qin Yu clenched his fists slightly and stared at the battlefield before him, gradually feeling the pressure. PFFTT. 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 At that moment, the nearby water suddenly exploded. Black tentacles reached out from the bottom of the water with a sharp sound, entangling the Sky Demon who were flying toward the Blackwater Archer Battalion. Monsters? The Palace Lord frowned slightly. Even if Heaven's Strength Realm cultivators were so strong that they could release their Chi of Vigor to avoid water, they would not be able to last long in the face of a great river like the Wei River, which flowed endlessly. As such, the existence of aquatic monsters was still a headache for them. It was also the reason why humans had never been interested in the islands or even the vast seas. The advantage aquatic monsters had in this aspect was enough to drag any opponent to death. Even if one's cultivation level was higher and stronger, one might not be able to catch the aquatic monsters in the water. However, if one did not go ashore, the monsters would have plenty of ways to kill them. However, the worry between the Palace Lord's brows disappeared in a flash. Aquatic demonic beasts were indeed not easy to deal with, but to the Sky Demon, his physical body was just something that could be abandoned at any time. Even if the Heaven Realm Sky Demon could not break free from the black tentacles, his life would not be in danger. At most, he would just go back and change his physical body and recuperate for a while. However, the black tentacles were obviously not that simple. After wrapping around the Sky Demon, they actually bit into his flesh bit by bit. But from the outside, there was no trace of them. At most, there was a circle of faint black marks where the tentacles had been wrapped, as if the black tentacles had directly melted away. However, it wasn't as simple as just disappearing. The Palace Master watched as the Sky Demon that had been entangled by the Sky Demon clutched their heads in pain and quickly fell toward the Wei River. Poison! The Palace Lord cried out in alarm. A look of fear flashed across his eyes, which were flickering with scarlet light. To the Sky Demon, his physical body was indeed something that could be abandoned at any time. However, he had always kept a respectful distance from those mysterious poisons. After all, according to scientific theory, the Sky Demon was a kind of spiritual body. Among the poisons, there were many that could cause damage to the mind and even erase the consciousness of the poisoned person, directly turning him into a walking corpse. However, although the Sky Demon was afraid of poisons, it was extremely difficult to eliminate the Sky Demon through them. Either the poison was too strong and would immediately take effect the moment it entered the body, or it would have a very long incubation period and would only explode when the Sky Demon let down his guard. Otherwise, the Sky Demon could abandon his physical body at any time and throw away the poisoned body like trash. However, the Palace Master had never seen such a situation before. Because those heavenly demons looked like they were in great pain, it was obvious that this poison could harm them, but it was not the kind of strong poison that could kill them instantly. But until now, none of the heavenly demons had given up their physical bodies and used their spiritual bodies to get rid of the poison. Dozens of Heaven Dipper realm white-clothed people fell into the Wei River, only causing a large splash. Then, there was no sound. Not even a single Sky Demon's spiritual body came out. Somehow, the Palace Master felt a trace of uneasiness. As time passed, this uneasiness grew stronger. Jade Lake Palace Master, we are honored by your presence. Why didn't you greet this king? Lin Yuan's huge body slowly broke through the surface of the Wei River. His sharp heterochromatic eyes penetrated the cover of dozens of ships and landed directly on the palace master's face. The murderous intent in his eyes was so cold that the palace master couldn't help but shiver from thousands of meters away. However, the palace master didn't lose to Lin Yuan. The palace master returned the cold gaze to Lin Yuan and said coldly, "Do I need the Northern Frontier's approval to go wherever I go? What's the difference between greeting and not greeting? Does the Dragon King intend to start an all-out war with my Jade Lake Palace?" Ha! Lin Yuan laughed strangely and said in a mocking tone, "Jade Lake Palace? What a big tone. Could it be that in Hongjuan's eyes, lackeys like you who have abandoned your physical body and ego are considered immortals?" As his voice fell, Lin Yuan's eyes revealed a trace of astonishment. Because he had indeed said the two words Hongjun, but when the words came out of his mouth, the two words had become, you. It was as if an invisible force had forcefully corrected the words that Lin Yuan had blurted out. However, it was unknown whether it was a trick of Ink Abyss or the system residing in Lin Yuan's body. Only after this sentence was changed did Lin Yuan realize that he had forgotten himself due to his anger. The system still hadn't revealed its identity. The origin of Heavenly Tao was just a guess that Lin Yuan had made after obtaining some information from Ink Abyss. The battle between Hongjun and the Heavenly Tao wasn't something that he could come into contact with. Therefore, revealing the master behind the Sky Demon wouldn't do Lin Yuan any good. Instead, it would make the system, suspected of being the Heavenly Tao, wary and murderous of him. As for the other side, there was no need to talk about it. An existence that could steal the Heavenly Tao couldn't possibly have weak magical powers. Even the twisted and dirty evil gods in the myths of Krusu in his previous life couldn't be directly called by their names. How could Hongjun, as the most powerful person in the untainted land, not have the corresponding means? Now that Lin Yuan didn't have any means to conceal himself, if he directly said the name, Hongjun, the other party would probably be able to travel through endless time and space in an instant and wipe out this future danger in the cradle. Even the system might not be able to escape. Everyone cultivates for immortality, but immortality is just empty talk if they don't become immortals. I have granted them immortality. Don't they deserve to be called immortals? The palace master put his hands behind his back and sized up Lin Yuan with cold eyes. She said coldly, "Dragon King, I don't understand what you mean. Do you think you can slander the immortals of the Jade Lake Immortal Palace by releasing a few monsters?" With that, the palace master waved his sleeves, and his tone became even colder. "Who will go get rid of these monsters for me?" As soon as he finished speaking, more than 10 Heaven Star Realm Sky Demons shot out. Although they did not know what method Lin Yuan had used, under the orders of the first king, there was no possibility of them refusing. In just one exchange, apart from the Heaven Star Realm Sky Demon that could barely hold on, the inferior Sky Demon were almost instantly killed. However, a moment later, the pool of black water beside Lin Yuan wriggled again. Soon, the slaughtered inferior Sky Demon actually appeared in front of everyone again. This was the tyranny of the Nether Realm's black water. Once they entered the Nether Realm's black water, only Lin Yuan could control their life and death. Unless Lin Yuan wanted their souls to scatter, they would still be reborn in the Nether Realm's black water even if they were killed countless times and then reincarnated again. Therefore, Lin Yuan could give any orders to the things controlled by the Nether Realm's black water. These existences had no other desires but to be completely freed. And the only one who could give them that freedom was the master of the Nether Realm's black water, Lin Yuan. Slaughter, rebirth, slaughter again, and rebirth again. The experts of the Jade Lake Immortal Palace tore apart these Sky Demon bodies again and again. However, a moment later, these controlled Sky Demon bodies would be reborn in the Nether Realm's black water. Perhaps it was because they had died too many times, but these heavenly demons started to show signs of insanity or numbness. They were no longer like when they had just been reborn. They would subconsciously avoid the enemy's attacks and show expressions of fear. In their eyes, there was nothing in the world that was worthy of their fear except for Lin Yuan. Therefore, when faced with the attacks of the experts of the Jade Lake Immortal Palace, not only did they not make any movements to dodge, but they also madly affected the opponent's attacks and then clawed, bit, and madly counterattacked. During this time, there were two experts of the Jade Lake Immortal Palace who had the idea of capturing the ringleader to capture the bandits. They directly bypassed the controlled sky demon bodies to attack Lin Yuan. However, Lin Yuan did not even make a move. They were pulled by the sky demon that had been resurrected from the nether realm's black water and forcefully dragged into the bottomless black water. Then, there were two more sky demon bodies that had been resurrected. Such a strange situation kept happening. Even the palace master's face gradually lost its composure. He glanced gloomily at Lin Yuan. He did not care about saying any harsh words. He just waved his sleeve, and the ship showed signs of retreating. No one was willing to fight a battle that they did not have any hope of winning. The dozen or so Heaven Strength Realm Heavenly Gates experts were almost exhausted from fighting, but Lin Yuan still looked calm and composed as if he did not use any strength at all. In reality, this was indeed the case. After all, the Nether Realm's black water was taken from a corner of the Netherworld River. It originally flowed endlessly. The lonely souls and wild ghosts in the Netherworld River were also constantly suffering. Lin Yuan did not need to use demonic power to activate it. He only needed to activate his innate skill and then watch the show. Of course, there was no invincible innate skill in the world. After this period of observation, Lin Yuan had already discovered that the Nether Realm's black water controlled things. If one stood on the Nether Realm's black water, they would be able to explode with the strongest combat power. The further away they were from the Nether Realm's black water, the weaker their combat power would be. If they were more than 500 meters away, they would even collapse on their own and be reborn in the Nether Realm's black water. Once the Nether Realm's black water was activated, it would not move again unless Lin Yuan deactivated his innate skill and then activated it again after half an hour of long guidance. Otherwise, once the enemy left the attack range of the Nether Realm's black water, Lin Yuan could only watch helplessly. Chapter 544. Lin Yuan understood that the son of a wealthy family should not sit in a dangerous situation. Although he was confident in his own combat strength, there were more than 3,000 sky demon cultivators in the Heaven Dipper realm around the palace master. Without the Nether Realm's black water to fight against the sky demon, Lin Yuan felt that he would be sending himself to death if he rushed forward. Therefore, Lin Yuan could only stare at the palace master and the others who were trying to escape. But soon, two slender figures descended from the sky, one on the left and one on the right, blocking the escape route of the Jade Lake Immortal Palace's ship. On the left was a handsome young man with pale skin and a red robe wrapped around his body. His temperament was slightly gloomy. On the right was Kong Lezin, who had long black and white hair and was dressed neither fish nor fowl. The two Kongming realm cultivators crossed their arms in front of their chests and coldly glanced at the Jade Lake Immortal Palace's huge ship. The red-clothed youth on the left was still holding a head that was dripping with blood. He casually threw it, and the head whizzed through the air and heavily smashed into a ship that was trying to retreat. Boom! There was a loud noise. The ship, which was dozens of meters high, was smashed into pieces by a small head. Kong Lezin tilted his head and stared at the ship in the middle of the fleet with ridicule. He said coldly, "You Sky Demon clan really don't put us in your eyes. You openly built the Jade Lake Immortal Palace in the south of the Shenwu Imperial Kingdom and gave us the elixir of immortality for free. Now you want to get out of this situation of being a turtle in a jar and drag the Shuangjin dynasty down with you." Speaking of this, Kong Lezin narrowed his eyes slightly and his killing intent soared. He roared, "Do you think we are dead?" In front of him was the unfathomable Lin Yuan, and behind him were two members of the top forces. Judging from the situation on the field at this moment, the palace master seemed to have nowhere to retreat. He had no other choice but to fight to the death. However, there was no trace of panic on the palace lord's face. He merely raised his hands calmly and muttered something. Strangely, he did not make a single sound. In an instant, the clear sky above the Wei River darkened. Countless black clouds appeared, and under the layers, the sky darkened. However, those black clouds exuded an ominous aura. They were not the kind of dark clouds that indicated rain, but more like a word Lin Yuan had read in a novel in his previous life: demonic aura. All of a sudden, Lin Yuan seemed to see a scarlet eye slowly open high up in the sky, staring at him mercilessly. Suddenly, countless thoughts appeared in Lin Yuan's mind. Most of them were that he had become a demonic beast and could never become a human again. The grievances of his previous life were the matters of his previous life, and he would never have the chance to take revenge. Also, he was essentially an outsider. No matter what he did or how long he stayed in the Tianwu continent, he was incompatible with this world. These negative thoughts kept breeding in Lin Yuan's mind, disillusioned and breeding again. It was as if Lin Yuan had to deny all his efforts and bow to the tragic fate in the future. Indistinctly, Lin Yuan even had the thought of dying. Ding! Negative spirit invasion detected. Host, please calm down and visualize the star chart to resist the opponent's negative spirit. The system's voice suddenly sounded in Lin Yuan's mind. Like a sudden clap of thunder, Lin Yuan was instantly liberated from his negative emotions. Ever since Lin Yuan did not follow the path it had planned and successfully activated the incense power model, the system had been silent for a long time. Although all the functional membranes could still be used, it had not given Lin Yuan any new skills or system models for a long time. In fact, it had been in a standby state for a long time. Unless Lin Yuan took the initiative to call the system, and it had to be a topic related to the activation of the incense power model, otherwise, the system would be unbound to Lin Yuan and watch him fend for himself. But now, it seemed that the system's thoughts were different from what Lin Yuan had expected. Because when Lin Yuan's heart was in despair, the system once again displayed its power and awakened Lin Yuan's mind that was gradually being controlled. It also told Lin Yuan how to resist the opponent. Lin Yuan was slightly stunned, but he quickly began to visualize the star chart that he had obtained from the war treasury. His heterochromatic eyes kept flickering with a strange luster as if countless stars were flickering in his eyes. At the same time, Lin Yuan also felt a strong and violent force rushing into his body and directly confronting the negative spirit. Then, he began to fight head-on. The two spiritual forces in Lin Yuan's mind were like two unbeatable armies fighting. Even though Lin Yuan's spiritual body did not participate in this battle, his mind, which was the battlefield, was aching faintly. He even felt a splitting headache, as if his head was going to explode in the next second. The strong and violent force was the power of the stars. After all, Lin Yuan was a highly educated person, so he knew very well what the nature of the stars, which were believed to be inhabited by immortals, was. They were not as gentle and beautiful as they were on Earth. In the universe, there were stars expanding, exploding, and even deviating from their trajectories to collide with other stars and be destroyed. These seemingly beautiful things were essentially bombs that could explode at any time. What frightened Lin Yuan the most was the negative spirit that had controlled him. Although the power of the stars was not the real power of the stars, the star chart produced by the system was not bad. However, the opponent was able to resist the power of the stars in the star chart with only one spiritual force. This kind of terrifying power was extremely terrifying. What kind of existence could resist the power of the stars with its own strength? And it was clear that Lin Yuan was not the only one who was affected by the negative spirit. The Blackwater Army warriors, Kong Lezin, and the blood-red-clothed young man, who were closer to him, all had painful expressions on their faces. However, the Sky Demon did not take the opportunity to attack. Instead, they knelt on the ground devoutly as if they were worshipping a god, worshipping the 9 heavens that were shrouded in layers of dark clouds. At this moment, Lin Yuan suddenly heard the sound of Buddhist chanting. Balls of golden light kept falling from the sky. The Sky Demon that came into contact with the golden light quickly smiled like snow under the scorching sun. The Blackwater Army warriors that were shrouded in the golden light quickly regained their composure. Their bodies swayed, then they fell into a deep sleep. Lin Yuan, on the other hand, could clearly feel that the third spiritual force had begun to pour into his sea of consciousness. Wu Hua's voice sounded again, and he sneered, "Then I'll cut off your divine sense today. When I have time, I'll find your real body to fight. Let's see if you can still talk as arrogantly as you did today." As soon as his voice fell, the sword intense soared into the sky, and the dark clouds above the 9 heavens dissipated. The two actually disappeared one after the other. After losing the suppression of the negative spirit, everyone on the battlefield gradually woke up. Other than those unlucky fellows who had died or fainted, no one, not even the demon beasts, hesitated. All of them charged towards the members of the Jade Lake Immortal Palace and started a vengeful massacre. After all, because of the negative spirit that was summoned by these demon beasts, they had truly walked through the gates of hell. Among them, the red-clothed youth and Kong Lezen recovered the fastest. The two of them, one on the left and one on the right, unleashed all kinds of terrifying aura chi, and forcibly displayed the momentum of thousands of soldiers and horses. With the strength of the two of them, they swept through the 3,000 Heaven Dipper realm sky demon, sinking all the ships on the field one by one. Their momentum instantly covered the entire battlefield. If a late-stage mortal evolution state cultivator used all his means, he might be able to kill an airborne realm cultivator. However, even if a late-stage airborne realm cultivator had thousands of means, he would not be able to win against a Heaven Dipper realm cultivator. The so-called half-step Heaven Dipper realm cultivator could be said to be completely vulnerable in front of a true Heaven Dipper realm cultivator. The gap between the realms would be greater at the later stages. At this moment, unless Lin Yuan used all his trump cards, he would not dare to easily say that he could fight someone above his level. Therefore, the 3,000 Heaven Dipper realm cultivators were the same as ordinary people in the eyes of the Kongming realm and the red-clothed youth, who were above the Kongming realm. They were all ants that could be crushed with a single move. After the end of the battle, Lin Yuan met up with the two of them with a dignified look in his eyes. More than 800,000 Sky Demon died in this battle. Whether it was the Sky Demon Legion summoned by Lei Qiusheng or the inferior Sky Demon absorbed by the Jade Lake Divine Palace, almost all of them died in this battle. However, after the battle, the Palace Lord of the Jade Lake Divine Palace used some unknown means to escape under their noses. "I'll go after him." The young man in red raised his eyebrows and said in an indifferent tone. Then, his figure disappeared from Lin Yuan's sight. Kong Lezen shrugged his shoulders helplessly. He cupped his hands towards Lin Yuan and said in a deep voice, "I don't know what the strange races outside the Heaven Gate ate wrong medicine. They attacked the Sky Martial continent on a large scale. Although we barely withstood these attacks, we also suffered heavy losses. In order to ensure that the Heaven Gate did not make any mistakes, we gathered many experts scattered all over the Sky Martial continent to help. We neglected the supervision of these Sky Demon. That's not good news." Lin Yuan's words did not have any intention of ridicule. His multicolored eyes flashed with worry. The Sky Demon clan was not a powerful force among the strange races on the other side of the Heaven Gate. However, as invisible beings, they could easily pass through the supervision of the Heaven Gate guards and invade the Sky Martial continent. They could cause trouble behind the backs of these top forces, but they never dared to make too big of a move. This time, the Sky Demon publicly gave away the elixir of immortality, established the Jade Lake Immortal Palace, and even colluded with the Shenwu dynasty, one of the 7 great empires. This kind of behavior could be described as courting death. However, the strange races on the other side of the Heaven Gate cooperated with the Sky Demon army of the Shenwu dynasty. There was a Sky Demon who was strong enough to fight against a top expert who took advantage of this opportunity to sneak into the Sky Martial continent. All kinds of signs seemed to indicate that the existence on the other side of the Heaven Gate had made a big move on the Sky Martial continent recently. But, something was wrong. These Sky Demons' actions are no different from courting death. They seem to want to. The worry in Lin Yuan's eyes became more and more intense. They want to attract all our attention to the Shenwu dynasty. Kong Lezen suddenly raised his head. The worry in his eyes was not much weaker than Lin Yuan's. After pondering for a moment, Kong Lezin seemed to have just thought of something. His expression changed several times. He cupped his hands and said, "Dragon King, I still have important matters to attend to. I won't stay on the northern frontier for long." Chapter 546. Lin Yuan let out a long sigh of relief after the matter was settled. The Jade Lake Immortal Palace had almost fooled him. After all, the Shenwu dynasty was separated from the northern frontier by the Wei River. As the only large river in the Central Plains, the Wei River wasn't completely within the Shenwu dynasty's territory. If one walked further north, the source of the Wei River wasn't far from the Frost Mirror grassland. It was considered a fertile grassland. However, due to the Shenwu dynasty's covetous eyes, the smaller tribes didn't dare to settle down in this grassland. The larger tribes didn't like this grassland that was far from the Frost Mirror Palace and had to face the Shenwu dynasty's army. Therefore, the Shenwu dynasty used this grassland as a border garrison and built a pass to stop the Frost Mirror cavalry from raiding. If one were to head downstream, most of the Wei River was still within the territory of the Qinjiang Empire. As the strongest of the 7 great empires, the Qinjiang Empire's military might not even be comparable to the northern region, let alone the other 6 great empires. However, the Qinjiang Empire's terrain was special. The Qinjiang Empire was surrounded by 2 great rivers, creating a natural barrier. Regardless of whether it was the divine martial heavy steppes or the Frost Mirror cavalry, they would not be able to cross the great rivers to attack them. Therefore, when Lin Yuan learned that the Jade Lake Immortal Palace was going to use the elixir of immortality to control the Shuangjin dynasty, his first reaction was that they would choose the safer land route to the Frost Mirror grassland instead of the Wei River, which was currently controlled by the northern frontier. Lin Yuan didn't even know how many aquatic monsters were lurking in the Wei River. Furthermore, the Starfall Army and the Southern Expedition were both at the border. Even the ships of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce had to be strictly inspected, let alone the fleet of the Shenwu dynasty. However, the reality was just that dramatic. What was wrong with the Jade Lake Immortal Palace's master? She actually used the safe land route as a distraction and brought her main force along the water route in an attempt to deceive the enemy. If it weren't for the fact that Lin Yuan had the territory model and reminded the Jade Lake Immortal Palace's fleet to pass by the Wei River, Lin Yuan would have found the decoy they had set up before. Although it wasn't purely a distraction, the team was carrying the elixir of immortality. If they could reach the Frost Grassland safely and meet the Frost Khan, they would still be able to achieve their goal. But now that the top forces had intervened, Lin Yuan didn't have any worries at all. When these big shots decided to be ruthless, they were more than 100 times more brutal than a demonic beast like him. At this moment, a group of light cavalry galloped over. The leading knight slowly took off the golden helmet on his face and bowed slightly to Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan's gaze paused on the knight for a moment, and his eyes flashed with surprise. This group of knights wearing golden armor wasn't the army of the Shenwu dynasty, but the personal guards of the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion. The leading knight was a top student from the Northern Frontier Military Academy. Although he couldn't be compared to those monsters in the Star General class, in terms of strength, he could be considered the ceiling of this batch of students. 31 years old, Heaven Dipper Realm Level 4. In the future, this knight named Shen Huai might be able to become a champion like Gao Buzhen. However, according to Lin Yuan's deployment, Chen Huai should not leave Li Zhong's side. At least before Li Zhong had enough strength to protect himself, he had to be Li Zhong's personal bodyguard. To be more realistic, Lin Yuan's establishment of the Northern Frontier Academy gave many people the hope of success and recognition. Although these students were grateful to Lin Yuan, their own ambitions were not small. Shen Huai was willing to be Li Zhong's bodyguard, and he was taking a huge risk. After all, if anything happened to Li Zhong, even if he died, it wouldn't be too much. However, the reason why Chen Huai was willing to accept this task was more for the sake of his own future. In terms of combat strength, he was the best among the students in the same batch, but in terms of strategy, he was not just a little bit inferior. If he wanted to lead an army or directly enter the battlefield, his future achievements would not be too high. Therefore, If he could befriend the higher-ups of the northern frontier, it could at least guarantee that he would not be eliminated in the northern frontier because of his own shortcomings. Therefore, for Chen Huai to appear here at this moment, there must be something extremely urgent. Otherwise, he would not joke about his life and future. Just like what Lei Chuxing said, Lin Yuan could not die. His future potential was limitless, and he was someone that the top forces wanted to curry favor with. Under this condition, Lin Yuan was still a balance point. The Hengduan Mountains and the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas were related to him. If Lin Yuan were to mysteriously die in an assassination, the consequences were definitely not something that the Xinwu dynasty could bear. However, Lin Yuan could not be touched, but it did not mean that Lin Yuan's confidants could not be touched. Especially Li Zhong, who was the think tank in the face of the organization. He had long been a thorn in Lei Chuxing's side. If it were not for the embroidered uniform guards and the demon emperor, Li Zhong's grave might have grass as tall as an adult. What is it? Lin Yuan sized up Chen Huai for a while, then directly opened his mouth and rushed to the main topic. The system had been pretending to be dead, so it had not issued a mission for a long time. In addition, the reward for this mission was a high-grade lottery chance. Whether it was skills or items, they were all rare things. If his luck was to explode and he was able to draw a system template, it would be of great help to Lin Yuan's future growth. Therefore, Lin Yuan did not count on that red-clothed youth from the beginning. He wanted to kill that missing palace lord himself. Therefore, he did not have much time to waste here. The king of the northern frontier asked this subordinate to quickly come and see the Dragon King. Chen Huai dismounted from his horse, then took out a small white porcelain bottle from his bosom. After gently removing the cork, he poured out a silver-white metal ball and said in a deep voice, "This is the immortal medicine of the Jade Lake Immortal Palace." It was discovered when the Northern Army was eliminating the black market. When talking about the black market, Chen Huai's tone was heavy. Although Lin Yuan had set up a black market that guaranteed the identity of the buyer and seller, there were still some transactions that could not be exposed. Although those things were not to the extent that Lin Yuan feared the immortal medicine, the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion would still not allow it to circulate. However, the aristocratic families and even some of the higher-ups in the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion would not let go of this fat piece of meat. Therefore, there were many unofficial black markets that traded things that were explicitly prohibited by the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion. The people who operated these black markets all had very big backgrounds. Naturally, there were many fugitives under them. Therefore, Zhang Qilin and his Northern Frontier Army's main opponent had always been these unofficial black markets. Although the results were remarkable, their losses were not small. Immortal medicine? Lin Yuan's eyes flashed with a cold light, even his voice was much lower. Yes, this subordinate can confirm it. Moreover, this subordinate has confirmed it with the higher-ups of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce and the members of the Blackwater Army who returned first. Chen Huai nodded in confirmation. Chapter 547. How great was the temptation of immortality? The Jade Lake Immortal Palace had only appeared for a short period of time, but it had already gathered hundreds of thousands of cultivators. Its might was obvious. Looking at the entire Sky Martial continent, the number of cultivators was actually not many. It was only about 1% of the population. After all, the old saying of, "the poor study while the rich study martial arts" was not false. Nurturing a cultivator was not difficult, but nurturing a powerful cultivator was too difficult. Not only did it require an outrageous amount of talent, it also required a large amount of resources. Ordinary people simply did not have the qualifications to cultivate. Lin Yuan controlled the entire northern frontier. The trade routes connected to the 7 great empires, and even the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas had transactions with the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. In addition, he had nationalized all the land in the northern frontier. Although the tone did not change, the benefits were not small. Under such an environment, the Northern Frontier Academy had only nurtured less than 100,000 cultivators. In terms of resources, they were already stretched to the limit. If not for the fact that these students had to be assigned to various positions in the northern frontier after graduation to earn a living, or directly leave the northern frontier to make a living, the Northern Frontier Academy might not have recruited a second batch of students. After all, the Northern Frontier's ability to support was only so big. It was impossible to support everyone unconditionally. Even the rich and powerful Northern Frontier was like this, let alone other places. And among these cultivators, 80% of them cultivated for power and wealth. There was also a portion that wanted to protect their inheritance or for the illusory immortality. Those who truly sought the great Tao and transcended were less than 1 in a million. At least, Lin Yuan only knew of one person, Incubus. A single pill could directly skip the long and boring journey of cultivation, allowing the user to become an immortal. This kind of temptation was not something ordinary people could resist. This was especially true for those who had already achieved success and fame. They could live off of their achievements for the rest of their lives. At this point, wealth and power were no longer attractive to them. However, immortality could achieve this. Even cultivators were like this, let alone ordinary people and members of aristocratic families. Therefore, the fact that his resistance to the elixir of immortality was almost non-existent was also something that Lin Yuan and Li Zhong had expected. However, Lin Yuan wasn't completely defenseless. The reason the army stopped the river and interrogated the fleet was to prevent the elixir of immortality from flowing into the northern frontier. However, even the palace master of the Jade Lake Immortal Palace was stopped, but they couldn't stop the elixir of immortality. There was no need for Li Zhong to explain how big the problem was. Lin Yuan felt a chill in his heart. Have you found out who's behind this? Lin Yuan suppressed the killing intent in his heart, but his eyes were still filled with coldness. Chen Huai shrunk his neck under Lin Yuan's gaze, but he still shook his head and said in a deep voice, I'm not sure who exactly it is, but most of the aristocratic families in the northern frontier are definitely involved. Moreover, some of the higher-ups in the northern frontier probably won't be able to escape, and there's also the Demon Emperor Society and the Embroidered Uniform Guard. Chen Huai didn't say anything definite, but there was still a lot of information in it. The temptation of immortality wasn't something those aristocratic family heads could resist. Even if they were scared out of their wits by Lin Yuan couldn't make them give up their pursuit of immortality, right? After all, the elixir of immortality was bought by them with real money. Whether they sold it to others or used it themselves, it was their freedom. In addition to the protection of the illegal black market and the cover-up of some of the higher-ups in the northern frontier, they couldn't stop themselves from courting death. After they consumed the elixir of immortality, it would be even more impossible for them to control themselves. Because at that time, they would already be on the same boat as the Sky Demon. Chen Huai said that most of it was already very tactful. Even if Lin Yuan killed 10 aristocratic family members for this matter, at least 8 of them were not wronged. Got it, I will deal with it. Let Luo Su, Shi Dong, and Li Zhong wait in the northern frontier's prince's mansion. This king will be back soon. I hope that they can give this king a reasonable explanation at that time. Lin Yuan nodded at Chen Huai, but he didn't have any intention of making things difficult for him. After all, Chen Huai was just a messenger. There was no need for him to bear the responsibility for Li Zhong's negligence. Yes. Chen Huai cupped his fists towards Lin Yuan, then mounted his horse again and galloped towards Shunning City. After watching Chen Huai leave, Lin Yuan opened his Eye of God to search for clues left behind by the palace master. At the same time, he secretly pondered about who exactly was protecting them from behind when the elixir of immortality flowed into the northern frontier. Among them, the biggest suspect was undoubtedly Shi Dong. The embroidered uniform guards were currently overloaded. Not to mention protecting them, they couldn't even spare any manpower to carry out their duties. However, at this moment, the members of the embroidered uniform guards were scattered in the north. It would be a lie to say that they didn't know anything about the elixir of immortality. However, Luo Su and his subordinates didn't take any action at all. It was obvious that they were plotting something behind the scenes. It was unlikely that Li Zhong would do such a thing. After interacting with Lin Yuan for a long time, he knew what the elixir of immortality was. It was impossible for him to allow it to flow into the northern frontier. Unless, Li Zhong also wanted to use this matter to scheme against someone. As for Shi Dong and the association of the Demon Emperor, the problem was too big. Although the association of the Demon Emperor also participated in the battle, as a civilian organization, the association of the Demon Emperor didn't have the authority of the embroidered uniform guards. There was no space for the association of the Demon Emperor to place people in the government offices and the various troops in the northern frontier. Most of them were still operating in the northern frontier, cooperating with Zhang Xiu's old subordinates to supervise the northern frontier and ensure that there were no slip-ups in the northern frontier. Therefore, only a fool would believe that the association of the Demon Emperor didn't know anything about the elixir of immortality. However, to say that it was Shi Dong who did it was a little unreasonable. Firstly, Shi Dong's chances of winning were higher than Luo Su's. After all, the government offices couldn't operate without the association of the Demon Emperor. Most of the information came from the association of the Demon Emperor. The black market was under the supervision of the association of the Demon Emperor. Even the members of the embroidered uniform guards and Yi Bus Ho were members of the association of the Demon Emperor in name. If they had to compete with the embroidered uniform guards, then Shi Dong had the highest chance of winning. Although the circulation of the elixir of immortality in the northern frontier was covered up well, it couldn't be said to be a secret. Lin Yuan would find out sooner or later, and he would lock his eyes on the association of the Demon Emperor. At this juncture, doing such a thing was no different from self-destruction. With Shi Dong's nature of seeking stability, it was unlikely that he did it. However, Shi Dong didn't do anything like Luo Su, as if he didn't know anything about it. That didn't make sense either. Suddenly, without any conclusive evidence, Lin Yuan didn't know who to pin the blame on. He couldn't even make sense of many logical problems, making the whole thing very suspicious. Chapter 548. Under the scan of the Eye of God, Lin Yuan couldn't find the whereabouts of the palace master. But soon, Lin Yuan felt relieved. The voice in the ninth heaven was obviously not easy to deal with. Otherwise, it wouldn't have alarmed a big shot in the south. Since the palace master could summon a big shot of this level, it was reasonable that he had some incredible means. So after a short consideration, Lin Yuan decisively gave up the idea of continuing to search for the palace master. The Jade Lake Divine Palace's approach was very strange. They almost directly told the top forces about their existence. They even introduced things like the elixir of immortality to increase the number of their companions. At the same time, they were provoking all the top forces. This method of self-destruction was obviously to attract the attention of the top forces to the south of the Shenwu dynasty and to cover up their other actions. So even if the palace master escaped, it was unlikely that he would return to the Jade Lake Divine Palace. He had already completed part of his mission. So at this juncture, a smart person would choose a place that wasn't the most dangerous but was definitely unexpected. For example, the northern frontier. Lin Yuan hadn't thought of this before, and the direction of the red-clothed youth was also the Shenwu dynasty. But now, the elixir of immortality was inexplicably circulating in the northern frontier. This made Lin Yuan realize that his internal situation wasn't as impregnable as he had imagined. Even among the higher-ups of the northern frontier, there were probably many inferior sky demon who had taken the elixir of immortality. But after knowing this, Lin Yuan had no way to deal with it. Whether it was aristocratic families, officials, or even those ordinary people who had been implicated, it was possible that they had taken the elixir of immortality. But to become a sky demon, one didn't have to give up their physical body. Their immortality was only on the spiritual level. When their physical body decayed, they could transform into spiritual existences and find a new physical body. They could gradually nibble away at the original spiritual body to obtain a new physical body. Just like how there was no knowing what was in a person's heart, no one could see through someone's disguise at a glance unless that person's acting skills were too bad. Lin Yuan was the same. He couldn't possibly kill everyone in the northern frontier just to get rid of Sky Demon, who had snuck into his team, right? However, this problem had to be dealt with, and it had to be dealt with before the end of the mission time limit. Otherwise, if the palace master was given enough time, who knew where he would escape to? Thinking of this, Lin Yuan snorted coldly and rushed to Shunning City. Meanwhile, Lei Qiusheng was wearing a dragon robe and sitting in the throne room, staring coldly at all the civil and military officials. Although he was collaborating with Sky Demon, the ambitious Lei Qiusheng naturally looked down on the Sky Demon's method of immortality. The pride in his bones wouldn't allow him to be a dog for Sky Demon. However, just because Lei Qiusheng thought so, it didn't mean that his subordinates thought so too. Although he didn't know the exact list, Lei Qiusheng was sure that nearly 90% of the civil and military officials in the court had already taken the so-called elixir of immortality and become immortals with immortality. Before today's morning court session, Lei Qiusheng had never realized that the civil and military officials under him were so united. Even a few princes who had the potential to ascend the throne had given up on their previous open and covert struggles. They stood neatly in the hall and spoke in unison on some political issues. It was as if they were a harmonious family of brothers. The bloody aura from before that was just short of drawing their swords and killing each other was completely gone. As an outstanding ruler, Lei Qiusheng understood some things the moment the Jade Lake Immortal Palace was exposed. For example, he had been played by Sky Demon from the beginning. All the support and plans were fabricated by Sky Demon to stimulate his ambition. He had to admit that the reason he was able to defeat the 10,000 Swords dynasty, which had been passed down for many years, was because of Sky Demon. However, he also realized that from the moment his ambition was stimulated by Sky Demon, he had become a chess piece on the chessboard. And now, he had become an abandoned chess piece. Was the Jade Lake Immortal Palace's existence to increase the number of Sky Demon and enslave more cultivators to fight for them? Of course not. This was a complete provocation to all the top forces on the Tianwu continent. When those powerful people were free, even if the Shenwu dynasty and the Jade Lake Immortal Palace were combined, they wouldn't be able to defeat them with just one hand. It was laughable that he had been working for others for so many years. This sentence was the truest portrayal of Lei Qiusheng's heart, because he knew that he was finished. On the other hand, Sky Demon's plan to attract the attention of those people to the Shenwu dynasty had already succeeded. Sky Demon wouldn't die. He would only be sealed. However, Lei Qiusheng would die. His Lei clan's descendants would die. Even the side branches wouldn't have a chance to survive. I said, send out the entire army to fight the Frost barbarians. Did you not hear me? Lei Qiusheng patted the dragon table in front of him and shouted with a gloomy expression. Although he was sure that the imperial court had been controlled by Sky Demon, Lei Qiusheng still wanted to do his last bit. No matter how much he had been bewitched by his own ambitions, after knowing the inevitable outcome, Lei Qiusheng did not forget that he was a part of the Sky Martial continent. He was the sworn enemy of the foreign races on the other side of the Heaven Gate. The stronger the Tianwu continent was, the weaker the foreign races' chances of success would be. Therefore, Lei Qiusheng didn't care about the overall situation anymore. He just wanted to mobilize the troops under his command to fight the Frost barbarians who kept invading the Central Plains and the South. It would be best if he could beat them until they returned to the Frost barbarians to recuperate. He didn't want them to be sacrificed in his plan and be buried together with him, a sinner. The crown prince, who had the highest prestige among the princes, took a step forward expressionlessly and said in a deep voice, "Father, this matter concerns the inheritance of the Shenwu dynasty. We can't be soft-hearted. Father, please retract your order. Divine Emperor, please retract your order." As soon as the crown prince finished speaking, all the civil and military officials in the imperial court knelt down. The few who were still standing had ashen faces. They looked even worse than Lei Qiusheng, who was sitting on the dragon throne. As the nobles of the Shenwu dynasty, they were naturally tempted by the elixir of immortality. However, they chose to reject it due to various concerns. They didn't know the side effects of the elixir of immortality before. But now, they knew. The price they had to pay was to lose their autonomy and become someone's lackey. Although these princes and civil and military officials were not as divided as those in the northern region, over the past few decades, who among them did not have any grudges against each other? who did not have any friendship with each other. There were not many things that could make them disobey Lei Chuxing without hesitation. At the very least, this matter before their eyes was definitely not one of them. 5 chapters. 5 consecutive days. Chapter 549. The army of the Shenwu dynasty had always been under the control of Lei Chuxing. Aristocratic families and nobles always had the right to speak in the army. However, people like Lei Chuming and Yan Xingqi were in the minority. Once something happened to the Shenwu dynasty, the entire army would only listen to Lei Chuxing's orders. Even if their family members had high military ranks, it would be useless. This was because in the past 100 years, there were many emperors who were better than Lei Chuxing in terms of governance. However, there weren't many who could surpass him in terms of martial arts. In the eyes of the soldiers, Lei Chuxing was the one and only god of war. Especially after Lei Chuming was conferred the title of King Qingpeng and Yan Xingqi was exiled to the northern frontier, Lei Chuxing became the #1 person in the army. Therefore, in the Shenwu dynasty, going against Lei Chuxing was a decision that required courage. This was because if one went against Lei Chuxing and was caught in the act, one's entire family would be exterminated. Without the support of the army, Lei Chuxing could kill whoever he wanted. What made Lei Chuxing afraid was the combined power of all the aristocratic families and sects, not just a single family. The princes of the Shenwu dynasty fought fiercely, and there were many powerful people behind them. However, they only fought to be the most outstanding among the princes and become the successor of the dynasty. No one was naive enough to think that they could challenge Lei Chuxing's authority. Therefore, at this moment, the crown prince who spoke out and the nobles who knelt on the ground weren't humans anymore. They were dogs. Dogs that were controlled by others. To put it bluntly, they were able to stand among the hundreds of officials in the imperial court of the Shenwu dynasty. They were all existences that could make a region of the Shenwu dynasty tremble with a stomp of their feet. Other than Lei Chuxing who controlled the army, no one could make them obediently submit to him. Even to Lei Chuxing, they were subjects and not dogs. Because of this slight mistake, so many people who were at the same level as them became like this. When they thought about how they were almost tempted, how could they look good? Since when did I need your permission to do things? Lei Chuxing stood up from the dragon throne and looked at the civil and military officials below. He sneered, a bunch of useless people who can't even maintain their selves. To think that I thought that you were all outstanding people and that with your help, the Shenwu dynasty would last for thousands of years to come. But now, it seems that although the rise of the northern frontier was a bit early, it wasn't an accident. With Lei Chuxing's great talent and bold vision, even those ambitious people wouldn't choose to make a move when Lei Chuxing was still alive. Therefore, the northern frontier grew from a remote corner that was regarded as a land of exile to a powerful enemy that shook Lei Chuxing's rule. In Lei Chuxing's view, this was undoubtedly reasonable and unexpected. However, after the trial of the elixir of immortality, Lei Chuxing could only silently accept this fact. No matter how vigorous and carefree the civil and military officials of the imperial court were when they followed him, decades of indulgence had eliminated their ambitions and ambitions. Now, these powerful officials only wanted to live forever so that they could sit high above and continue to enjoy the glory, splendor, and wealth that ordinary people didn't even dare to dream of. There was no dynasty in the world that couldn't be destroyed, not to mention that the current higher-ups of the Shenwu dynasty had already been corrupted into a group of rice worms. They could only lie on their books of merit and wait for death. They used their methods to go against their colleagues, against the emperor, and to seek benefits for themselves. Relying on such useless people to govern this great dynasty was no different from slow suicide. As soon as he finished speaking, the civil and military officials of the imperial court and the several princes' expressions became ugly. After all, although the elixir of immortality was a free gift from the Jade Lake Immortal Palace, its essence was still incomparably precious. The Sky Demon could corrupt the civil and military officials of the imperial court and make these high and mighty dignitaries act according to his will, but he couldn't corrupt the entire army of the Shenwu dynasty. Even if he could corrupt some of the generals, it was useless because Lei Chuxing's imperial edict was much more useful than the generals' exhortations. This move of bypassing the officials and directly commanding the army was equivalent to directly commanding the generals. The crown prince, who was still far away from Lei Qiusheng, said coldly, "Lei Qiusheng, don't forget that you are jackals of the same tribe as us. Even if you want to abandon the dark side and join the light side now, they won't let you go. If you act according to our plan, you will have a chance to live." The crown prince's face was distorted. He didn't look like the crown prince of a country, but more like an evil spirit that had crawled out of hell. Even his voice became hoarse and unpleasant, like the sound of fingernails rubbing against glass, which made people frown unconsciously. However, the crown prince's behavior made those dignitaries who had rejected the elixir of immortality even more certain that after taking the elixir of immortality, even if it didn't show anything on the surface, it was equivalent to losing oneself in essence. This was because the tone and voice of this crown prince didn't sound like the crown prince who was usually praised as a benevolent ruler. At first glance, it was obvious that the creator of the elixir of immortality was using the crown prince's mouth to speak. "Now that things have come to this, you still want to use words to affect my mind? Do you really think that I am a 3-year-old child? I have already ordered the 3 armies to go out to battle. If the Frost Mirror cavalry doesn't retreat, the army won't retreat. Furthermore, I have also explained what the elixir of immortality is and the current situation of the imperial court. I have strictly ordered them to pretend that they didn't see it even if I changed my mind." Lei Qiusheng placed his hands behind his back, and his aura was unparalleled. He laughed loudly and said, "Even if you all give me the elixir of immortality now, it will be useless. Even if I am going to die, I will drag all of you down with me." At the same time, Lei Qiusheng's aura rose again and again, from the initial stage of the Heaven Star Border Realm to the advanced stage of the Heaven Star Border Realm. It didn't even seem like it was going to stop. It continued to advance toward the Void Realm, as if the bottleneck didn't exist at all. The Crown Prince still looked at Lei Qiusheng with a ferocious expression. After a while, he opened his mouth and sneered, "I understand now. You are not Lei Qiusheng at all. You are the shadow by his side. You speak so righteously, but in the face of death, didn't he still choose to run away? However, this is also good. After I kill you and capture Lei Qiusheng, the imperial edict will naturally be fake. Cultivation wasn't something that could be achieved overnight. Even if one used heavenly treasures to greatly increase one's cultivation, it was still the same. Some bottlenecks couldn't be overcome, and forcefully consuming spiritual items or pills to increase one's cultivation would only cause one's body to explode. Therefore, Lei Qiusheng, who was in the Heaven Star Border Realm, couldn't become a Void Realm expert in the blink of an eye. Therefore, there was only one explanation for the current situation. Chapter 550. 8 hours later. In the meeting room of the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion. Lin Yuan's cold gaze slowly swept across the faces of the 3 people. He said in a cold tone, "So, where is the explanation this king wants?" Luo Su shrugged. No expression could be seen on his bandaged face, but there was an obvious smile in his voice. Dragon King, in order to participate in the war against Shenwu and Frost Mirror, the embroidered uniform guards even used handymen to clean. If you ask me, I really have nothing to say, because there are no other documents on my desk except for battlefield intelligence, military movements, and the behavior of the generals. Luo Su didn't hide his gloating at all. Although the embroidered uniform guard didn't completely remove themselves from this matter, because of the special circumstances, the embroidered uniform guard didn't have extra manpower to use elsewhere. In addition, the embroidered uniform guard targeted the officials of the Northern Frontier. Their monitoring of the aristocratic families and civilians was naturally not as strong as the association of the Demon Emperor. If Shi Dong didn't have anything to say, then Luo Su naturally had nothing to say. Shi Dong looked at Luo Su expressionlessly. His lips moved, but he didn't say a word. After all, the civilians of the Northern Frontier were the foundation of the association of the Demon Emperor. Whether it was civilians or aristocratic families, they were all under the supervision of the association of the Demon Emperor. Even those non-official black markets shouldn't exist. But Sherdong sat in this position and didn't do anything. Even if they didn't pursue the matter of the elixir of immortality circulating in the northern frontier, he would still be labeled as incompetent. Therefore, whether the elixir of immortality was pursued or not, Sherdong wouldn't be able to stay in the position of vice president of the Association of the Demon Emperor for long. Especially the intelligence agency under him. Even if he didn't dissolve it, he would have to hand it over to someone else to manage. The moment Lin Yuan showed his blade, he had already become the loser. Although his mind was spinning wildly, Sherdong really couldn't think of any words that could reduce his guilt, let alone exonerate him. Li Zhong expressionlessly picked up the tea leaves floating on the surface of the tea with the lid and said indifferently, "You can't say that. The elixir of immortality is something produced in the Yaoqi Immortal Palace in the south of the Shenwu dynasty. It can't grow wings and fly to the northern frontier, can it? They are secretly circulating in the northern frontier, and the Association of the Demon Emperor is indeed responsible for that. However, there are more than one or two elixirs of immortality. The Northern Battlefront Army has found at least 3,000 elixirs of immortality, and that is not including the ones we didn't find and the ones that were consumed." When he said this, Li Zhong took a sip of the steaming hot tea and said coldly, "If such a large amount of immortality medicine is flowing into the northern frontier, are the embroidered uniform guards intelligence network in the north all blind?" Luo Su was choked by Li Zhong's words, and his face suddenly turned ugly. He originally thought that Sherdong would be the first to make trouble for him. According to his understanding of this old enemy, even if he couldn't get away with it, Sherdong would choose to die together with him. Even before this, Luo Su had already prepared a plan and didn't take Sherdong seriously at all. However, he didn't expect that when Sherdong didn't say anything and looked as if he had accepted his fate, Li Zhong would jump out and start a war. "King of the northern frontier, it's easy for you to say that. Right now, the situation in the north is very complicated. Let's not talk about the Frost Mirror Cavalry and Shenlin Jun's reserves for now. Let's talk about our internal problems. The southern expedition is entrenched in Donglin City. Once Li Zhongxing makes a move, our northern defense line will collapse instantly. The Frost Mirror Cavalry will march straight in. Not only the north can't withstand it, but the northern frontier can't even escape. There's also the Fallen Star Army's Gao Buzhan. Although I don't see anything wrong with him for now, as an old general of the Shenwu dynasty, he is a hidden danger that we must guard against. The entire defense of the Wei River is in Gao Buzhan's charge. Once something goes wrong, the Shenwu dynasty will retaliate with a punch. With the current strength of our northern frontier, we won't be able to withstand it. There's also the southern army stationed in the northern frontier. General Zhang Qilin used to be Shenlin Jun's reserves. His loyalty to Lei Qiuxing is definitely higher than our northern frontier prince's mansion. Once Zhang Qilin has evil intentions and stabs us in the back, all the supply routes will be cut off by him. At that time, the troops sent out will all starve to death on the northern battlefield. Also, the transmission of every piece of information is very difficult. It can't be compared with peacetime. In the past, we only needed 2 channels, one in the open and one in the dark, to deliver the information on time and safely. However, on the battlefield, a piece of information may not reach you safely even if we send out 7 or 8 teams with the help of flying demonic beasts. Luo Su's face darkened. He squinted and said, "The manpower of the Genie Guard is limited. I'm not a genius. I really can't spare people to do other things." Li Zhong coldly glanced at Luo Su, then snorted coldly and continued to drink his tea. Luo Su stood up and knelt down in the hall. He faced Lin Yuan and said in a deep voice, "I've failed the Dragon King's trust. Although I'm not the main person responsible for the elixir of immortality, I can't absolve myself from the blame. Please punish me, Dragon King. Do. Sherdong's fingers tapped rhythmically on the back of the chair. He said in a strange tone, "Yes, you're indeed not the main person responsible. If the Genie Guard had fulfilled their duty, the elixir of immortality wouldn't have entered the northern frontier, and it wouldn't have been traded under my nose. So I'm the main person responsible, right? You." Luo Su glared at Sherdong with a murderous look. The elixir of immortality trade took place on the northern frontier, so Sherdong couldn't escape the blame no matter what. But then again, if the genie guard hadn't chosen to be perfunctory, how could such a large amount of the elixir of immortality be transported to the northern frontier? It's still the same sentence. The elixir of immortality couldn't have grown wings and flown in. Luo Su spoke with difficulty, but it was the duty of the embroidered uniform guards, and the investigation of the people entering and leaving the north was also the duty of the embroidered uniform guards. A few light words would not be able to cover it up. Sherdong's meaning was very clear. If they had to die, then everyone would die together. Lin Yuan didn't remain silent like he had in the previous meetings. Instead, after the three of them had finished speaking, Lin Yuan said faintly, "This king wants an explanation, not, who will bear this responsibility." As his voice fell, the three of them became serious, and their eyes gradually turned cold. If they really wanted to talk about responsibility, none of them could escape. And the explanation Lin Yuan wanted obviously wasn't as simple as someone paying with their life. What he wanted was a feasible method to find the sky demon hidden in the northern frontier and destroy the elixir of immortality. Li Zhong and Luo Su both looked at Sherdong's face at the same time. After all, it wasn't important what they said, but the intelligence work inside the northern frontier still depended on Sherdong and his Demon Emperor Association. Chapter 551. Sherdong took out a small white porcelain bottle and poured out a metal pill. He said coldly, "Although the Association of the Demon Emperor didn't nip this matter in the bud, please don't treat us as incompetent people. When the elixir of immortality gradually spread in the northern frontier, I personally led people to follow up on this matter." When he mentioned incompetent people, Sherdong's tone was obviously heavier, and his gaze fell on Luo Su's face. The elixir of immortality matter indeed had nothing to do with him. When this forbidden item that Lin Yuan and Li Zhong had repeatedly ordered to be excluded from the northern frontier appeared in the northern frontier, Sherdong felt his heart turn cold. In a trance, he even saw his own death. However, Sherdong had taken over the intelligence work of the Association of the Demon Emperor for a long time after all. He wouldn't neglect his work because of his emotions. Therefore, after a short period of shock and fear, Sherdong quickly began to investigate this matter. However, the more he investigated, the more Sherdong feared the mastermind behind the elixir of immortality circulation in the northern frontier. This was because the other party had unknowingly created a terrifying protective umbrella. No matter how Sherdong investigated and collected evidence, he only caught some Tom, Dick, and Harry. These people who were secretly arrested by the Association of the Demon Emperor didn't even know about the whole plan. They were just second-hand sellers of the elixir of immortality. Even the person who supplied them behind the scenes was an unsolved mystery. However, in this short period of investigation, Sherdong had completely understood how terrifying the other party's power was. Not only did the local government obstruct the Association of the Demon Emperor's actions, the underground forces that had previously submitted to the Association of the Demon Emperor attacked the investigators at all costs. After a few days of confrontation, the total number of deaths from both sides had exceeded 4,000, and this didn't include those who had to withdraw from this big show due to injuries. What made Sherdong's heart palpitate the most was that as his investigation deepened, he even noticed that a large number of members within the Association of the Demon Emperor were involved in the distribution of the elixir of immortality. This was because whether it was the progress of the investigation or the traces of his own group, they seemed to have been in the hands of the other party. This had nothing to do with their abilities. It only proved that the other party had pawns within the Association of the Demon Emperor, and their position was not low. He didn't know how many members of the Association of the Demon Emperor had taken the elixir of immortality, nor did he know how many of those who didn't take the elixir of immortality but were working with the mastermind behind the elixir of immortality purely for profit. There were fewer and fewer people who were worthy of Sherdong's trust, and the frequency of confrontations between the two sides was getting lower and lower. Meanwhile, the circulation of the elixir of immortality was also getting more and more frequent. It was no longer a private transaction within a small circle. It had even appeared openly in some unofficial black markets. Zhang Qilan and his men had only obtained a very small batch of the elixir of immortality after wiping out the black markets. Shi Dong had seized and destroyed even more of it. However, the association of the Demon Emperor was still huge and powerful, but the spies that Shi Dong could mobilize were getting fewer and fewer. From an open confrontation between the two sides, Shi Dong's men could only follow far behind those traders, counting the list of trades and who was involved. At present, Shi Dong had a list of names in his hands. Although he wasn't sure how many people on the list had taken the elixir of immortality, he was sure that at least 9 out of 10 people on the list had not been wronged. Of course, there might be some innocent people on the list who had been implicated. Although they were quite suspicious, they had never participated in the trade of the elixir of immortality. They had only been in frequent contact with those who bought and sold the elixir of immortality. There were still more participants who hadn't been investigated. This was certain. Therefore, Shi Dong had been busy with this matter during this period of time. He didn't dare to slack off at all. To put it bluntly, such a big thing had happened at the northern frontier. As the president of the Association of the Demon Emperor who was responsible for intelligence and spies, he couldn't absolve himself from the blame. But if he did it well and gave Lin Yuan an explanation, even if he had to die, it would be him. If he didn't do it well, he would just sit around in the office and wait for death, or degrade himself to wallow in the mire with the other party. If that happened, Shi Dong wouldn't be the only one who would die. Therefore, before the elixir of immortality was circulated in the world, it had always been in the form of private transactions. Each transaction might only have 3 to 5 elixirs of immortality. But during the period when President Shi was fighting with the other party and was crushed by the other party, the trading range of the elixir of immortality began to gradually expand. There were even cases where a batch of elixirs of immortality had reached the scale of thousands of elixirs of immortality. Li Zhong's eyes flickered, as if he was thinking about something. He murmured, "But if that's the case, President Shi, why did you choose to face those traders directly, and didn't inform the Wang residents of the northern frontier first?" Li Zhong's voice was somewhat meaningful, as if he really didn't understand Shi Dong's actions, but also seemed to be hinting at something. Shi Dong smiled helplessly and said, "Wang residents of the northern frontier, it's not that I want to measure the heart of a gentleman with my own yardstick, but the elixir of immortality is too strange. Not to mention informing the Wang residents of the northern frontier, I didn't even reveal any information to the higher-ups of the Association of the Demon Emperor. Because before the answer is revealed, no one knows who is loyal to the northern frontier." Speaking of this, the bitter smile on Shi Dong's face deepened, and he continued, "From the very beginning, when the suppression by force failed, I knew that this wasn't a problem that could be solved with weapons. I could only sneak in to investigate, make a list of as many people involved in this matter as possible, and wait for the Dragon King to deal with it. Since that's the case, involving a third party or a fourth party would only make things more complicated. The other party's protective umbrella didn't just play the role of protection. Whether it was the real confrontation with Shi Dong, or the elixir of immortality being sold directly to the black market from private transactions, although it didn't comply with the laws of the northern frontier, its influence was indeed getting bigger and bigger, and the scale of the sales was also getting bigger and bigger. But all of this, the only person who knew the truth was Shi Dong, who personally followed up and investigated. Whether it was Luo Su, who was the commander-in-chief of the embroidered uniform guards, or Li Zhong, who was in charge of Shunning City, they only knew that the elixir of immortality had appeared, but they didn't know that the elixir of immortality had been circulating in the northern frontier for a long time. This already explained a lot of problems. Nourishing things silently. The other party's way of selling the elixir of immortality in the northern frontier's market could be said to be the difference between heaven and earth, but there wasn't even the slightest bit of information in between. Either the seller of the elixir of immortality was extremely skilled, and used a special method to conceal the elixir of immortality, or the various government offices of the northern frontier had been completely infiltrated by the elixir of immortality. In other words, if the northern frontier was compared to a plant, then the northern frontier at this moment might have already rotted to the roots. Chapter 552. The northern frontier would be rotten to the core. From beginning to end, this matter was within the expectations of Li Zhong and Lin Yuan. The appearance of the elixir of immortality had only accelerated the process, causing everything to happen much earlier. Li Zhong's face was gloomy as he said hatefully, "If what President Shi said is true, then the biggest problem in the northern frontier right now is those aristocratic families. I said at the beginning that these guys are wolves that can't be tamed. No matter how badly they are beaten, as long as there is a chance, they will still choose to betray their masters. This is their nature, and it can't be changed at all." As a child of a poor family, Li Zhong had never had a good impression of the aristocratic families, especially in the series of actions against them. The one who had led the various suppression plans had always been Li Zhong, but Li Zhong was not satisfied with the behavior of the aristocratic families with their tails tucked between their legs. Because from the beginning, Li Zhong had never prepared a way for these aristocratic families to survive. However, there were obviously capable people in the northern frontier aristocratic families. At the beginning, they had resisted Lin Yuan's reforms, but later on, they had even taken the initiative to use their own power to solve some of the hidden dangers of the northern frontier's reforms. This had allowed some of the aristocratic families in the northern frontier to survive. Later on, under the instigation of Kang Lezhen, the aristocratic families in the northern frontier openly rebelled. Li Zhong had thought that this was an opportunity to wipe out all the aristocratic families in one fell swoop, but at the last moment, some small and medium-sized aristocratic families had rebelled, taking the initiative to help the northern frontier army to wipe out the large aristocratic families that were stubbornly resisting. After that, they had paid a considerable price to preserve their family's inheritance. Now, with the elixir of immortality, anyone with a discerning eye would know that the aristocratic families in the northern frontier played a dishonorable role in this. First of all, with the status and position of those aristocratic families, cultivation and strength were not enough to make them obsessed. Otherwise, they would not be aristocratic families, but sects that were even more extreme in terms of martial strength. What these aristocratic children were truly obsessed with was wealth and power. In a situation where they had both, they were willing to pay a high price in order to pursue the so-called immortality. Even those big shots from Lin Yuan's previous life, who could shake the entire continent with a stomp of their feet, couldn't escape from this. Even the royal family, who was the head of the various dynasties and generations of aristocratic families, were crazy about the existence of the elixir of immortality, because they hoped that they could live forever, to be able to control their own wealth and power forever. In his previous life, the elixir of immortality only existed in legends, yet it was sought after to such an extent. If the elixir of immortality really did appear in the Sky Martial continent, how could it not be coveted by the aristocratic families? If we investigate from the perspective of the aristocratic families, the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, after being rebuked by Li Zhong, Luo Su, who hadn't been able to catch his breath, returned to his work state at this moment, and said this with a solemn expression. The North was now a battlefield. Ordinary aristocratic families didn't have the ability to pass through the main roads guarded by the various armies in the North. Only the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce had the ability and confidence to do this, and only the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce could maintain trade with the Shenwu dynasty at this juncture. The elixir of immortality wasn't difficult to obtain. After all, the Jade Lake Immortal Palace had taken out a large amount of the elixir of immortality to give to the cultivators who relied on the Jade Lake Immortal Palace. In addition, the Jade Lake Immortal Palace also had the intention of pushing the elixir of immortality to the south. Therefore, the merchants of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce only had to express their intentions and they would immediately be received by the upper echelons of the Jade Lake Immortal Palace, and receive a large amount of free elixir of immortality. Regardless of whether these merchants of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce were still human after leaving the Jade Lake Immortal Palace, it wouldn't affect their thoughts of transporting the elixir of immortality back to the northern frontier to sell. This was because anyone with a little bit of business insight could see that the elixir of immortality was very profitable in the market. Only those kinds of pills that could ignore bottlenecks and increase cultivation, or those that could increase aptitude, could compete with the elixir of immortality. And it was very clear that the latter actually wasn't as competitive as the elixir of immortality. It was even a heaven-defying divine medicine that had a price but no market. Even if one had money, it was useless. If one couldn't buy it, one couldn't buy it. In terms of supply, it was far inferior to the elixir of immortality. Although Lin Yuan had repeatedly emphasized that the elixir of immortality wasn't allowed to appear in the northern frontier, it couldn't stop the merchants' nature of pursuing profits. At worst, if Lin Yuan really didn't allow it to be sold publicly, they could use their influence to make private transactions or directly sell it in those illegal black markets. Not only was it secretive and safe, but without the Northern Frontier Prince's Mansion's commission, the profits would be even higher. To be more realistic, the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce was no longer the small chamber of commerce that had to rely on Lin Yuan to survive in the early days of its establishment. Even if their trade routes were still in the hands of Lin Yuan, they had secretly contacted many powerful demonic beasts. Even if they had offended Lin Yuan, they still had trade routes to use in the Hengduan Mountains. It was just that it was no longer as safe, the cost of transportation was higher, and the time it took to transport goods was also longer. In other words, Lin Yuan was no longer the only partner of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. However, the existence of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce at least supported nearly 2/3 of the capital expenditure of the Northern Frontier. Once the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce collapsed, at least 80% of the projects in the Northern Frontier would be stopped, and a large number of refugees would have nowhere to go. The wealth that Lin Yuan had seized from the north was all used to maintain the situation in the Northern Frontier. It was impossible to continue the construction of the Great Wall that had already been planned. This was a bloody fact, and it was also something that Lin Yuan and Li Zhong had to solve, but they couldn't do so for the time being. In the original plan, Lin Yuan had intended to use the method of boiling the frog in warm water to slowly eliminate the threat of the aristocratic families and the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. After all, the children of the aristocratic families were the absolute main force of the Northern Frontier's officials. Without these people, even Shunning City would be out of control, not to mention the remote local officials. It was even possible that a situation of feudal lords would rise up together. After all, training a qualified official was a long and arduous process. First, one had to learn theoretical knowledge in the Northern Frontier Academy. After passing the test, one would be assigned to various government offices to accumulate experience. Only after accumulating experience over time could one become a qualified official. It would take at least 3 to 5 years to train an official who could govern a place. This was also the time needed to change the blood of the Northern Frontier. On the other hand, the young generals of the Northern Frontier's military academy were a different matter. They had studied in the military academy for countless years, and their theoretical knowledge was unrivaled. Therefore, they only needed to learn the basic art of war and strategy, as well as some common code words of the Northern Frontier, and they could be sent to various troops to be polished. The real famous generals were all trained on the battlefield. No one had heard of any of them learning in the military academy. If there were such people, it would be due to their natural talent, and it wouldn't have much to do with the Northern Frontier Academy. Therefore, when it came to changing generals, Lin Yuan could be capricious. However, when it came to changing officials, Lin Yuan had to be patient. Chapter 553. As for the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, it was indeed a problem at the moment, but for the future Lin Yuan, it could be easily dealt with. They dared to go against Lin Yuan because they had already grown up. In the Hengduan mountain range, Lin Yuan wasn't the only beast king that cooperated with him. However, they forgot that Lin Yuan was still a monster beast. Therefore, although the Northern Frontier was ruled by Lin Yuan, it wasn't his base. The ones that Lin Yuan could truly trust were the mountain-shaking ape clan in the Stoneclaw Forest and the monster beasts created by the system. In time, when Lin Yuan became the new Beast King or developed the Stoneclaw Forest to the same scale as the Green Marsh clan, no matter how much the Beast Kings favored the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, they would still stand on Lin Yuan's side. Firstly, they were the same kind as Lin Yuan. There was no need for them to compete with Lin Yuan for benefits. That would only damage the monster beast's strength. Secondly, if the Stoneclaw Forest really became a force that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the Green Marsh clan, then other than the 3 Beast Kings, no one would dare to provoke Lin Yuan. Both of these were problems that needed time to be slowly dealt with. However, due to the appearance of the elixir of immortality, these problems had erupted much earlier than Lin Yuan had expected. Moreover, they had reached the point where they had to be dealt with as soon as possible. This was why they had become such a thorny problem. Who is in charge of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce now? Lin Yuan's voice was a bit hoarse. It seemed that he wasn't in a good mood. Sherdong carefully glanced at Lin Yuan. After confirming that this Dragon King didn't have any intention of harming anyone, he replied, "It's Chairman Su who is in charge of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce." Originally, there were 2 vice-chairmen involved in the operation. However, ever since Chairman Su formed a cooperative relationship with several desolate monster realm beast kings, the 2 vice-chairmen were kicked out of power. Lin Yuan was silent. Chairman Su was referring to Su Nan. They could be considered the second batch of humans that Lin Yuan had encountered after arriving in this world. Due to his sudden outburst of kindness back then, the Lu family had sent out cultivators to capture him and bring him back to Zhanshan City. Furthermore, they had been facing endless troubles. This had thoroughly infuriated Lin Yuan. After he had gained a foothold in the Hengduan mountain range, he had led the demonic beasts to massacre Zhanshan City. Su Nan was a wandering martial artist who had sought refuge with the Lu family. Between Lin Yuan and the Lu family, the choice he made was to save his own life. Lin Yuan could still clearly remember that Su Nan had pushed his brothers into the horde of demon beasts in order to buy him 2 or 3 seconds to escape. In order to establish the association of the demon arch, Lin Yuan had let Su Nan off and had even been supplying him with spiritual items and other resources. That was how he had the conditions to rule the northern frontier. Lin Yuan's evaluation of Su Nan had never been high. Although he was capable and could perfectly complete the tasks that Lin Yuan had given him, he was still a selfish person. As long as there were enough benefits, there was nothing that he couldn't sell out except for himself. Therefore, after the northern frontier had gradually stabilized, Lin Yuan did not hesitate to kick Su Nan out of the northern frontier's authority. Although he still had the title of the Association of the Demon Thearch as president, the actual authority had been transferred to Ding Zai, Sherdong, and other promoted vice presidents. Lin Yuan also had the idea of making use of trash and sent Su Nan to the position of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce's president. Facts had proven that there was no problem with this decision. This could be seen from the fact that the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce had raised the banner of the Northern Frontier's economy. A selfish, unscrupulous, and wealthy Chamber of Commerce president had saved the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce a lot of detours. Furthermore, he had quickly repaid Lin Yuan in order to secure his position. It was just that Lin Yuan, who knew the deep-rooted bad habits of humans, had never trusted Su Nan. This was because unlike other people, Su Nan's heart was so dark that Lin Yuan had personally experienced it. Now that the authority of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce had fallen into Su Nan's hands alone, and the 2 vice presidents that Lin Yuan had arranged to keep Su Nan in check had been kicked out of the authority level. This was enough to prove that Su Nan had already found a backer and was fearlessly planning to go against Lin Yuan. It was just that before the matter of the elixir of immortality broke out, Su Nan had never revealed his ambitions, making people think that he was just fighting for power. However, from the current situation, Su Nan's ambitions were as clear as day. He had long been in cahoots with the Sky Demon, similar to the relationship between Lei Qiusheng and the Sky Demon. Capture him for me. Lin Yuan took a deep breath. His heterochromatic eyes swept across Sherdong's face, but he sighed softly in his heart. Some problems had to be faced sooner or later. Lin Yuan used to be like a normal person with rich emotions, but after a good deed created endless trouble for himself, Lin Yuan had been resisting those unnecessary emotions. Therefore, when it came to his subordinates, Lin Yuan had never taken any conciliatory measures, inciting the various factions to oppose each other while maintaining the balance of power between the various factions. Therefore, when Lin Yuan was asked to purge his subordinates, Lin Yuan was not moved at all. This was because from the beginning, he had no feelings for these subordinates that had helped him conquer the world. Therefore, Lin Yuan would not overdo things like Zhu Yuanzhang, nor would he be like Chai Rong, who had given Zhao Kuangyin the chance to usurp the throne because of his high regard and admiration. However, it was also because Lin Yuan had treated his subordinates as tools that these people did not approve of Lin Yuan from the bottom of their hearts. They instinctively thought that the northern frontier being where it was today was all due to their efforts, and that Lin Yuan was just relying on his own strength to suppress their demonic beasts. With such a mentality, the entire northern frontier had fallen at an unusually fast speed. First, there was Lei Fan and Hu Yen fighting for power, and now, Su Nan was willing to betray the northern frontier for his own benefits. Lin Yuan wanted to reflect on himself, but laughably, he found that he could not do that at all. Because he was a demonic beast, no matter how well he did, it was meaningless. Just like how the citizens of the northern frontier knew that the northern frontier today was all because of Lin Yuan's series of reforms, but no one really liked Lin Yuan. In their hearts, Lin Yuan was still a boorish demonic beast. Therefore, when Li Zhong was ordered to carry out the land confiscation, Li Zhong was quickly hailed as a wise ruler, a hero by the citizens of the northern frontier, but no one mentioned Lin Yuan's contributions in the slightest. Those who are not of my race will have different hearts. This sentence was rather impactful. But what about when you are of a different race? Especially Lin Yuan, who had the body of a demonic beast, but the soul of a human being. It had to be said that Lin Yuan was indeed tempted by the system's suggestion. It was not purely for the sake of obtaining the power of incense, but more so because he had accumulated too much resentment in his heart that he needed to vent. Only by letting these people know that their happy lives today were all because of Lin Yuan's existence, and if they denied this point, what awaited them would be a world of purgatory. Only then would Lin Yuan be able to vent the resentment in his heart. Chapter 554. It seemed that the association of the Demon Emperor had been secretly fighting with the people behind the elixir of immortality during this period of time. Even in the relatively peaceful Shunning City, there were still many spies from the association of the Demon Emperor hiding there. It took less than half an hour to find Su Nan's whereabouts and bring him to the prince's mansion in the northern frontier. To everyone's surprise, Su Nan seemed to have expected this day. Not only did he not resist, he even stopped the guards around him. Then, he very calmly followed the association of the Demon Emperor's spies to Lin Yuan. Luo Su crossed his arms in front of his chest and looked at Su Nan expressionlessly. When he was the commander of the mountain-blocking city's garrison corps, he had fought with the association of the Demon Emperor more than once. However, after he joined Lin Yuan's side, he gradually lost his respect for the association of the Demon Emperor. Therefore, he had never carefully understood Su Nan, the founder of the Association of the Demon Emperor. The elites of the Association of the Shifter Emperor had already been split up. Needless to say, the embroidered uniform guards and Knight Busho, Xia Siyu's assassin criminals, and Shaoan's demi-human army were also the mainstays of the Northern Territory. The current Association of the Shifter Emperor was nothing more than an empty name. Most of its members were recruited from defeated organizations, or members who weren't moldable enough were kept in the association of the Shifter Emperor. The cadres and leaders of the past were now characters that could shake the entire northern region with a stomp of their feet. Naturally, Su Nan, the guild leader, had gradually retreated behind the scenes. A person like this was naturally not worthy of much attention and attention. However, not worthy of attention and not paying attention were two different things. The responsibility of the embroidered uniform guards was to monitor the local government agencies. The Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, an organization that controlled the economic lifeline of the northern frontier, was naturally under the name of the prince's mansion in the northern frontier. It could not be compared with the association of the Demon Emperor, which was almost reduced to a civilian organization. Therefore, the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce had always been under the supervision of the embroidered uniform guards. At the same time, the embroidered uniform guards, who were used to monitor the local government, were a new team. They were not used at all. Even though the war in the north was in full swing, these people were still carrying out their duties and were not transferred to the front lines by Luo Su. If there was really a problem with Su Nan, it meant that Su Nan had completed this series of operations right under his nose. This not only put a huge blame on Luo Su, but also made him feel like his face was burning. It was as if the monitors he had selected were all useless. "President Su, do you know why we're looking for you?" Li Zhong glanced at Lin Yuan, who was resting with his eyes closed. When he saw that the latter had no intention of speaking first, he cleared his throat and took the initiative to speak with Su Nan. Su Nan was silent for a moment. The corners of his mouth rose slightly, and a sinister smile appeared on his face. He said in a deep voice, "Su Nan is not a good person. I've done countless dirty things. There seems to be only one thing that could make President Sure of the Demon Emperor Association, Commander Luo of the Embroidered Uniform Guards, and our Northern Frontier King come to investigate me at the same time." Speaking of this, the sinister look on Su Nan's face grew stronger. He said word by word, "No. Death. Medicine." As his voice fell, Lin Yuan slowly opened his eyes. A cold light flashed in his heterochromatic vertical pupils. Li Zhong, Sherdong, and Luo Su's breathing stopped at the same time. They stared blankly at the sinister and awe-inspiring Su Nan. After a moment of silence, Luo Su was the first to smile. He tilted his head and said, "So, President Su should still have a lot of trump cards in his hands. Otherwise, I don't." Su Nan smiled and looked at Luo Su's face. He directly opened his mouth and interrupted him. At the same time, Su Nan lifted his collar and said with a smile, "If I had a trump card in my hands that I haven't used yet, why would I allow myself to be captured and enter this certain death situation? Although I feel that you don't have the guts to kill me." Luo Su's eyes were cold. He looked like he was about to explode. Li Zhong took a few steps forward and slowly raised his right hand in front of Luo Su. He said coldly, "President Su is right. However, it's not that we don't have the guts to kill you. It's just that there's no need to kill you. I have to say that I overestimated you. I thought you were the same as Lei Qiusheng. You chose to cooperate with Sky Demon. But now it seems that you're just an abandoned pawn." Su Nan casually pulled a chair and sat down. He didn't seem to be affected by Li Zhong's words, but the smile on his face clearly froze. He dared to appear here, of course, not because he had seen through life and death, but because he had exposed himself. He had no way of dealing with Lin Yuan's thunderous fury. So he didn't bother to make unnecessary resistance. It was better to put himself out in the open and make Lin Yuan hesitate to attack the person behind the scenes. As for confidence, many of the aristocratic families of the Northern Frontier, the officials of the Northern Frontier, and the members of the various organizations of the Northern Frontier had taken the elixir of immortality. Lin Yuan didn't have the ability to kill a river of blood. But if there was a possibility of sitting down and negotiating, Lin Yuan would have to lower himself and have a good talk with Sky Demon. This way, he would have the chance to struggle for survival between the two sides. Don't make it sound so unpleasant. You call me an abandoned pawn. Is His Highness in a much better situation than me? The smile on Su Nan's face gradually disappeared. He slowly said, "Without me, there would be no Yao Emperor Association, and there would be no Black Jiao to rule the Northern Frontier. His Highness is where he is today because of me. But I don't care about His Highness's gratitude. After all, you and I are the same. We're both pawns on the chessboard. Whether it's an abandoned pawn or a decisive player, we can never become chess players." At this point, the smile on Su Nan's face completely disappeared. He changed the topic and said coldly, "How do you know that I am not His Highness's tomorrow?" Luo Su's and Sherdong's expressions were a little uneasy. Back then, Su Nan had been Lin Yuan's right-hand man. But the result couldn't be said to be bad, but it wasn't good either. The Demon Emperor, who was created by Lin Yuan, would be torn apart by Lin Yuan. In the past, those who had to respectfully call him president were all on an equal footing with him in terms of status, and the power in their hands was even more terrifying than his. Although he was sitting in the position of the president of the Chamber of Commerce in the northern region, How much influence could a chamber of commerce made up of the major families in the northern region exert? And the situation that Su Nan had faced back then was very similar to the situation that they were facing now. When the northern frontier needed spies, Shi Dong had been in the limelight. Later, when the northern frontier gradually stabilized, the embroidered uniform guards suddenly appeared and scattered Shi Dong's power. Now that the two tigers were fighting, no one could be sure that they would be the winner. Chapter 555. Su Nan had always been a dark person, and his ability was not bad. Having been in the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce for so long, the skill of stirring up discord was self-taught. After finishing his words, Luo Su and Shi Dong's hearts were shaken. If Su Nan were to add fuel to the fire, perhaps Luo Su and Shi Dong would be pulled to his side. However, Li Zhong obviously would not give Su Nan this chance. Chairman Su's eloquence is not bad, but it's a pity that your heart is too dark. Although I dare not say what will happen in the future, I can be sure that what Chairman Su is today will not be my tomorrow. From the beginning of the Northern Frontier's establishment until now, it is still like a newborn baby. However, when it comes to me, the power has changed to the third batch. Some people are silent, some people are rising, and some people are dying without a burial place. Could it be that Chairman Su still does not understand that we actually have no power? Everything we have is given to us by the Dragon King. If the Dragon King is unhappy, we are nothing. The death of Lei Fan and Hu Yan, the two kings of the northern frontier, can be said to be the trend of the times. It can also be said that they were seeking their own deaths. If they knew their position from the beginning and did not have those delusions that they should not have, they would still be the kings of the northern frontier. Li Zhong clasped his hands behind his back. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly as he mocked. Guild Master Su can be considered a senior figure in the northern region, but in the end, he still couldn't overcome the barrier in his heart. With two examples in front of him, he still walked the path of death. Oh. Su Nan raised his eyebrows, and his face was a little gloomy. He sneered and said, "The Shifter Emperor Association was founded by me. For the Black Jiao to be where it is today, I, Su Nan, must have worked hard, right? But I can't be the king of the northern frontier. Even the Shifter Emperor Association was broken up, and I was even kicked out of the northern frontier's power. First, the Imperial Secret Service was established, and then 2 vice presidents were stuffed in. Wasn't it that the Black Jiao could not tolerate me, Su Nan?" From a certain point of view, Su Nan was right. After all, whether it was the top forces or the 6 great dynasties, none of them were willing to see the demonic beasts that had been suppressed for so many years suddenly rise up, and even leave the Hengduan Mountains to occupy human territory and still live like fish in water. However, Lin Yuan took a shortcut. He did not directly rule the northern frontier, but pushed out a puppet-like king of the northern frontier. In this way, even if the other forces were dissatisfied, when they did not have the courage to fight with Lin Yuan to the point of mutual destruction, they could still use the excuse that the king of the northern frontier was a human to numb themselves. They even felt that as long as Lin Yuan died in the future, the northern frontier would quickly return to human rule. That was why they left the northern frontier as a nail to disgust Lei Qiusheng. If it wasn't for the fact that the top forces thought highly of Lin Yuan, the other 6 great dynasties would have already sent out their own cultivators to assassinate Lin Yuan when they saw that the Shenwu dynasty was weak. Therefore, the reason why Lin Yuan was able to rule the northern frontier was because of the existence of the Association of the Demonic Emperor. In the subsequent rewards, the leaders of the Association of the Demonic Emperor were gradually divided, forming the various factions of the current northern frontier. However, Su Nan, the great contributor who created the Association of the Demonic Emperor, was not given any rewards. He was even kicked out of the Association of the Demonic Emperor and became the president of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. In the beginning, Su Nan thought that he could earn a lot of money by sitting in this position, so he endured it. However, after Lei Fan and Hu Yan, the 2 kings of the northern frontier, were killed and imprisoned, Su Nan saw hope. After all, at that stage, there were not many people who were suitable to take over the position of king of the northern frontier. Su Nan was definitely the most powerful contender. However, Lin Yuan's choice was Li Zhong. As a person who had a dark heart and valued personal gain, Su Nan could calmly watch Lei Fan and Hu Yen die one after another. Because at that time, he knew very well that the title and authority of king of the northern frontier would not fall on him. However, when this authority was placed in front of him, he could no longer remain calm as a wise man. Therefore, working together with the Sky Demon to overthrow Lin Yuan's rule became the only way for Su Nan to take revenge on Lin Yuan. Pitiful and very sad. Li Zhong shook his head in disdain. After a moment of silence, Li Zhong said slowly, "You were the one who created the Shifter Emperor Association. However, what does the association have to do with you? All the resources were provided by the Dragon King. You only gathered those fugitives who wandered outside the rules, and turned them into mercenaries who would risk their lives for profit. What makes you think that without you, there would be no Shifter Emperor Association?" Su Nan's eyes slowly widened as he looked at Li Zhong in disbelief. Sherdong stood up from his seat and said with a faint smile, "Whether you admit it or not, as long as you have the same resources, anyone can establish the Shifter Emperor Association at that time. And a true wise man will make the Shifter Emperor Association into something that belongs to him." Bullshit. Su Nan roared in a low voice, his eyes red as he looked at Sherdong and roared, "Who do you think you are? At that time in the Shifter Emperor Association, you were just an outer member. The reason why you are where you are today is because of Black Jiao's favor. Your position, your power, all of it should have been mine, you thief." If Su Nan hated Lin Yuan, then for Sherdong, other than hatred, he also felt jealousy. Because the Shifter Emperor Association was created by him single-handedly, while Sherdong took over the place and used the association's resources to raise himself from a lowly outer member to one of the vice presidents of the association. Moreover, he was a person with real power who stood side by side with Ding Zai. Back then, when the two of them stood together, even he, the president, had no say. Later on, when Ding Zai's identity was exposed, he was sent to the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. In such a huge Shifter Emperor Association, the only one who had the final say was Sherdong. But all of this should have belonged to him. Sherdong, one of the biggest spies in the northern frontier, was just a thief who stole his position and power. If the Dragon King needed mercenaries, with the amount of resources he offered, he could mobilize all the demon slayers and professional mercenaries in the northern frontier. Don't talk nonsense about humans and demons being irreconcilable. In front of absolute benefits, anyone would bow down. Moreover, the demon slayers and mercenaries in the northern frontier are existences that live on the edge of blades and blood. As long as the price is high enough, why would they care if the employer is a demon? Sherdong's lips curled into a mocking smile as he mercilessly attacked. "Your ability isn't bad, at least you can pull the Shifter Emperor Association up under the suppression of the 7 border cities. But in my eyes, you are still a complete piece of trash. The Shifter Emperor Association in your hands and mine are two completely different organizations." Chapter 556. Shut up. Su Nan's face became more and more ferocious, like a demon from hell baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. "You're just a thief. Everything you have should belong to me. Everyone has the right to teach me a lesson, but you don't." Pfft, Sherdong sneered and said slowly, "Whether you admit it or not, the Shifter Emperor Association in your hands is just a mercenary organization that has no loyalty to the Dragon King. It's even a group of outlaws who are used to wandering outside the law. It's not even comparable to those professional mercenaries or demon slayers. At least those people know what they can touch and what they should avoid." At this point, Sherdong spread out his hands and said calmly, "But the Shifter Emperor Association in my hands is an intelligence organization that makes people tremble in fear. They have unquestionable loyalty to the northern frontier and the Dragon King. They can obtain first-hand information at any time, and they can turn part of the information into a large amount of wealth. I can be where I am today not only because of the Dragon King's grace, but also because I deserve this grace. Li Zhong crossed his arms in front of his chest again and said with a cold gaze. The Shifter Emperor Association's eyes and ears failed several times in a row, causing a series of tragedies. It was also your doing, wasn't it? Back then, you controlled the largest intelligence organization in the northern frontier, but you only knew how to use it to scheme against others. At this moment, Su Nan could no longer say anything to refute. He could only helplessly protect his head and let out meaningless roars. In the end, Su Nan had not changed at all. Even if he was the president of the Shifter Emperor Association and the president of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, deep in his heart, he was still the despicable person who would push his brothers to the herd of beasts for his own survival. The reason why he could communicate with the upper echelons of the northern region, the nobles of the 7 dynasties, and the rich merchants was not because he was successful, but because he had been hypnotizing himself. He believed that his success was all due to his outstanding ability, and that his wealth and status were all earned with his own hands. But Sherdong and Li Zhong's actions were no different from rubbing salt on his wound. The creation of the Shifter Emperor Association? Even if it was someone else, given enough resources, they would still appear. In other words, even without Su Nan, the Association of the Demon Emperor would still be the Association of the Demon Emperor. It might even be a better association of the Demon Emperor. However, without the association of the Demon Emperor, Su Nan would still be a wandering martial artist. After offending the Lu clan, he wouldn't even be able to return to Zhanshan City. He could only take the risk and venture into the Hengduan mountain range to head to other regions. How would the Demon Emperor make use of him? The Fiend Emperor Assembly in Sherdong's hands was completely different from the Fiend Emperor Assembly in his hands. This was because Sherdong had indeed turned the council of the Demon Emperor into his own subordinates. Without Lin Yuan's orders, Sherdong's orders were absolutely effective within the council of the Demon Emperor. Otherwise, an organization similar to a mercenary organization would not be willing to take such a huge risk to challenge the embroidered uniformed guards who were responsible for monitoring the northern frontier. Sherdong and Li Zhong cooperated and used the power of words to break down Su Nan's psychological defenses. They even denied the truth to a certain extent, constantly instilling one thing into Su Nan: without Lin Yuan, you are nothing. A person who relied on self-hypnosis to maintain his temperament would not be able to withstand such methods. Therefore, Sherdong and Li Zhong had perfectly achieved their goal, to completely break down Su Nan's psychological defenses. At this moment, Luo Su, who had been waiting at the side for a long time, suddenly took a step forward and grabbed Su Nan's wrist. His eyes turned and emitted a cold light. Then, Luo Su's voice slowly rang in Su Nan's ears like the whisper of a demon. From this moment onwards, your heart is hell. What you see and hear next will be the things you fear the most. Before you break free from this fear, your body will become my puppet for me to use. You will say whatever I want you to say and do whatever I want you to do. Luo Su's cultivation method also came from the war treasury and was very suitable for this torture expert. The secret technique he was using now was called Divine Power Prison. It could drag the victim into an eternal illusion and make the victim repeat the things they feared the most over and over again until the victim could completely overcome this fear or the caster released the secret technique. During this period, the victim would be a puppet. Any request made by the caster would be unconditionally carried out by the caster. Even if the caster wanted him to die, he would not blink an eye. It sounded like a very powerful secret technique, but the conditions to use it were extremely strict. The victim had to be in a state of mental breakdown to use this secret technique. Otherwise, once the victim showed any signs of resistance or struggle, this secret technique would instantly feed back to the caster, causing the caster to experience the fear that came from the depths of their heart over and over again. Even if the victim could hear and remember the last sentence before falling into the illusion, it was meaningless. Fear was something that was extremely difficult to overcome, not to mention the fear in the depths of one's heart. It was something that even one's soul would tremble after seeing it. Anyway, when Lin Yuan first drew this secret technique from the war treasury, although the introduction did not say how many people had been affected by this technique, there was not a single person who could break free from the control of this secret technique. Using this secret technique, Luo Su kept a large number of puppets. And now, Su Nan had become one of them. Seeing Su Nan's forehead full of cold sweat and his face pale, Luo Su let out a long sigh of relief. He reached out and pressed Su Nan's head to lift his eyelids. After confirming that the light in Su Nan's eyes had completely faded, Luo Su nodded in satisfaction and retreated to the side. Li Zhong thought for a moment, then asked with a dark expression, "How many people have taken the elixir of immortality?" Luo Su repeated Li Zhong's question. Su Nan frowned slightly and seemed to struggle for a moment. Obviously, this question was an absolute taboo in Su Nan's heart. However, a secret technique was a secret technique. Su Nan's struggle was completely meaningless. Soon, he began to spit out the names of people who could make the ground tremble with a stomp of their feet in the northern frontier. At first, the names were all big shots, but soon, in addition to these big shots, the names of some civilians and servants who were used to test the elixir were also reported. Even so, the faces of the 3 people present were abnormally dark. After all, nearly 40% of their subordinates had taken the elixir of immortality. Although their authority was not directly taken away, there was no difference in essence. Under such circumstances, it would be strange if their expressions were good. After Su Nan finished reporting the name list, Li Zhong rubbed his chin and asked, "Are you sure it's only these people?" You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.